You test. Hafidane, good evening. The Committee on Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, Senior Citizens now convenes this oversight hearing. Public hearing notices were provided to the media. First notice on Monday, June 11, 2018. Second notice on Wednesday, June 13, 2018. For the record, today's Monday, June 18, and the time now is 5:37 p.m. The committee will hear and accept testimonies from the GMH management as well as from the public. The committee has called this oversight hearing to obtain status updates on the Labor and Delivery Ward Birthing Center project, the most recent CMS report, and the general operations of the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. What we had earlier is we had the Sergeant-at-Arms swear in those who will be testifying at today's oversight hearing. And so if any of you who have not yet taken your oath by the Sarge, we ask you to just, if you do intend, if you indicated your presence and wish to testify and indicate on the sign-in sheet, we ask you to please take that oath, and the Sarge will do that right now as well. So any of you that who haven't, yes, sir. This is an official oversight hearing, so we want to make sure that everything is done under oath. Just Masi, and thank you. Hafidane, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to recognize the presence of Speaker Cruz. Speaker Cruz, thank you for joining us. Vice Speaker Therese Terlahi, Senator Frank Uggan, Senator Tommy Morrison, Senator Mary Torres, Senator Espaldon, the Vice Chair of the Committee on Health, Senator Esteves, Senator Will Castro, Senator Muña, thank you very much and Senator Nelson, thank you very much for joining us here this evening. This oversight hearing was called on June 8, 2018 for the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority to provide this committee an update on the general operations of the hospital and the progress of the labor and delivery warrant, and as well as as we had mentioned, the CMS report. Since the June 8th call for this oversight hearing, there have been several developments that have transpired, including the public hearing on a proposal to repeal the 2% sales tax mandate set to take effect on October 1st, 2018. Part of the proceeds of this new tax would be designated to GMH for operations. At the hearing conducted by Senator San Agustin, there were serious allegations raised by several courageous individuals who are now considered whistleblowers. Additionally, on June 14, 2018, Resolution 345-34 was duly adopted by the 34th Guam Legislature. This resolution was introduced back in February 8, 2018. It has sat idle with only 4 votes for its passage since then. This resolution is relative to creating a special investigating committee that shall be authorized to investigate the administration and management of the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority concerning alleged coercion and or undue pressure of GMHA employees to GMH modernization program, funding, and accreditation. The providing of alleged false information to members of Imina 34 na Les Laturanguahan during official legislative proceedings regarding GMHA on January 22, 2018, hiring, termination, and contractual decisions from January 6, 2011 to present, which may or may not have been consistent with GMHA's mission and ethical standards, potential violations of the Sunshine Reform Act of 1999 and other laws, and the financial audits and related information relative to the financial state and condition of GMHA. And so that was the basis of Resolution 345. To protect the integrity of the investigation that this committee will now be leading, per Resolution 345, any information that members of the public, including any employees of GMH, provides will be compiled and provided directly to this special investigating committee. To avoid this oversight turning into a public debate that may lead into a non-conducive dialogue, I'm requesting that any testimonies that addresses items covered by this investigation be provided in writing and submitted to my office so that it will be provided to the Special Investigative Committee. Subsection 4503 of Chapter 4 GCA states in part, No appointing authority or supervisor shall initiate or administer any disciplinary action against any employee on account of the employee's disclosure of information. This is a section of law that protects any employee that may come forward with relevant information to aid in the special investigation authorized by the Guam legislature. I want the employees to know, who are here and those who may not be here, that this body, this legislature, will fully protect you and ensure that the law is fully enforced. And so at this time, we'll move forward. We will entertain any members of the public that first want to provide any testimony on this oversight hearing. And we have those that have signed up, and I'll call, once I call you, if you can please take your seat up on the panel. Dr. Kuzui Shimabukuro, Mr. Val Perez, Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero, we have Nora Garces, and Dr. Nicole. Are you? Okay, sure. You're next, actually. If you signed up here, if you wish to testify, then you may. If not, then you don't have to come up. Dr. Kuzui, I recognize you.
Dear 34th Legislature, sorry, I'm a bit nervous. Dr. King once said, "The ultimate measure of man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." Since my last week's testimony at the legislative hearing, GMH administrators have begun a campaign of character assassination, as you can see, against me. People are asking me why I haven't refuted their accusations. Well, as the saying goes, the truth will speak for itself. I thought to myself also, why would anybody believe them? They lied on the May 2nd and repeatedly under the oath in this same building in front of you guys in the legislatures. My testimony last week wasn't given to raise my reputation, so I felt no need to refute their assertions. I know who I am, and I know my reputation. My life's legacy around the world, in Japan, in the US, in many continents will leave me standing tall in the midst of these atrocious character assassination attempt. Administrators were successful in prior attempts with others. I've seen it. Many people sent me an article about the previous people who had spoken up, who was reported to the Guam Medical Board. Many people warned me that it would happen to me as well. Some allegations will be made, and I will be reported and my license will be revoked. This was the risk I was willing to take, come in front of you. But I know these character assassination attempts won't work against me. My reputation and what I stand for is already a public knowledge, even before my arrival to Guam. Though GMH administrators and the public of Guam might not know about my reputation, because I don't go out of my way to advertise my accomplishment. Just to give an example of what I have done in the past, last week, my situation and my testimony was brought up at the dinner with the Japanese Consul General and the medical attaché at their house. A few people there correctly identified me as Dr. Shimabukuro, the one who worked for Japan's first pediatric emergency rescue team during their triple disaster in 2011. And later, I joined the team led by Dr. Kurokawa, a former Japanese cabinet advisor, to bring foreign aid to disaster zone recovery. I was successful in my efforts, whatever part I may have played. So you see, people already know that what I'm standing for. I am not scared of sacrificing my life for children. That's why I agreed to be deported and deployed even to Fukushima, leaving everything behind. I wrote a living will to my parents before I left. I'm that serious. So, if I lose my job and my career over this, well, maybe it's worth it. I am not scared to lose income if it means preserving my integrity. However, even though I thought it was senseless and worthless to come refute the claim, I decided to come forward to public once again, so the public knows I didn't cave in, that I didn't go into hiding. I know exactly about those atrocious lies GMH admins are manufacturing, and I'm going to refute them so that you too can be encouraged to speak up and know that you are protected by the legislature and the land of the law. This claim that the Joint Commission failure was Dr. Koze's fault and a responsibility as a physician compliance officer, that's out there. I was told that it was said in the press conference by the GMH administrator. If you had any knowledge of TJC, Joint Commission, you will know that they don't revoke accreditation on just one visit. GMH was already in jeopardy, in probation long before my arrival. For Dr. Lizama to state that he was surprised that accreditation was withdrawn demonstrates his inattention to such an important matter and solely placing the blame on one person when it was pervasive throughout the system. This revoking of the accreditation was writing on the wall. Furthermore, the notion of my being in charge of the entire Joint Commission accreditation is another fabricated story. It is true that I was hired as a physician compliance officer. It's in my job description. I was ready to take on this huge task, but I also knew that Dr. Duenas also expressed a wish to continue his role in compliance responsibilities. During my first week, Dr. Duenas and I had a meeting on December 19th, which I provided to you, emails between us. I wanted to clarify my role as a compliance officer to eliminate redundancy and to prevent my stepping on his toes. His direction to me, which I was told that came from Dr. Lizama, was that we will divide and conquer. After this draft was made, another revision was made, and it was agreed by all executives that Dr. Duenas takes Medical Service Performance Improvement Committee and enjoin compliance OPPE, FPPE, and a peer review. And instead, I took on anesthesia department and their contracts. Dr. Duenas stated in that meeting that morning, I've been doing it, the compliance that is, so I will continue to do it. You can see his chairmanship and in his minutes in this committee and a signature of OPPE and FPPE so that you can see what I'm telling you is truth, that I know that to be truth. All of these areas, you have the copy of the Joint Commission report. All of those areas considered likelihood of harm high or scope widespread were not within the areas I worked on and was in charge of when we divided and conquered these responsibilities. I corrected almost all of those previous citations in the areas I was in charge of, and in addition, tried to assist in the areas where Dr. Duenas was in charge of. I wish I could have done more. Dr. Duenas and our compliance officer, Daniel, repeatedly stated that my assistant was crucial and that I have done an excellent and tremendous job. There were no issues with my performance, I was told. All of this is on the record, by the way. Now that I have become a whistleblower, GMH administrators are retaliating by suddenly accusing me in the press, in the public, as me being the sole cause of the TJC failure. This retaliation must cease immediately. As a leader of an organization, one upholds transparency and a safe working environment whereby everyone can speak their concerns. In trying to discredit me, GMH administrators are trying to silence not just me, but everybody who is willing to speak up. Not only what I submitted to you today and on my record, you can see that there is a survey that went out year after year within the organization. It shows it, that people don't feel safe to speak out in our organization because things like this happens to everyone who speaks up. So why would we report to our... What a choice do I have than do a whistleblower? Another allegation I was told that was made during the press conference was, I did this whistleblowing all for the money because I was the highest paying administrator at GMH on the record. GMH administrators trying to paint a picture of me that I'm greedy or I am in it just for the money, that I am the highest paid administrator. This is another ludicrous claim that I can immediately refute. Just to give you a background, I was a successful medical director and reputable PICU doctor where I practiced prior to arriving in Guam. My job as a PICU physician was easy. Average PICU physicians in the nation work days are anywhere from 10 to 14 days a month in the nation. I was at the low end of it. I only worked 10 days as a clinical pediatric ICU doctor. In LA, I was very well loved, lived a balanced academic, administrative, clinical work life, which I enjoyed so much. I only worked 10 days a month, guys. And not only did I give up the nice lifestyle to put myself on call 24/7 while I'm on island for GMH, I also took a huge pay cut. My income went down by $50,000 annual by accepting a job here in Guam. The GMH administrators all know this very well. They even apologized to me during our initial meeting in August 2016 for not being able to pay what I really am worth. Let's talk about how much GMH saved by hiring me as a medical director. It is widely known, it's a public record that I held multiple responsibilities at GMH officially and even what is not listed here officially. I have provided with you with the list outed titles of what I do at GMH. These job descriptions are usually held by one person as a full-time employee. As you can see, I held and functioned as a 6 full-time employee equivalent of work. Listed are average salaries of those full-time positions at GMH if they were to hire 6 individuals to do my roles. The total adds up to be $921,000. I did all of that. Not only that, I brought significant source of income and revenue to GMH. Let's talk about CPOE, computer-based physician order entry. If you ask any of the board members or the IT department, you will know that I took on way more than listed in my job description. I was approached by the IT department in mid-December 2016, a few weeks after I started, and right after fiscal and audit board meeting, which was led by former trustee Mr. Val Perez. They stated that they needed help, IT department that is, in succeeding the Meaningful Use program stage 2. For those of you who is not familiar with the healthcare system, the concept of meaningful use rests on the 5 pillars of designed for betterment of healthcare. In order to participate in this meaningful use program, to be rewarded the monetary incentive for stage 2, the participating medical center is required to ensure that the physicians are entering orders on the electronic chart instead of the paper chart. That incentive is over $1 million. This is the money GMH could absolutely use. The IT team was tasked to accomplish this CPOE project. since October 2016, but they were saying that they were not getting enough support. The goal was to have 30% lab order entry, 30% radiology lab order entry, and then 60% of the medication order entry. We were not meeting the lab portion. We weren't close. And the deadline, when I asked when the deadline was, it was coming in less than 2 weeks, December 31st. I had less than 2 weeks to work on this. I almost fell out of the chair. How can I do this in less than 2 weeks? I worked tirelessly with the IT department. I was there all the time. And we changed the systems and order entryways, and so that we can identify what's the most ordered lab in the facility so we can capture this. IT department stated that I was instrumental in this project despite the short notice. On the morning of December 31, we got the text. We made it. We made the CPOE. But there were some other things that we didn't meet the criteria for the CPOE, such as demonstrating the quality measurement. We had to do an attestation, multiple attestation thereafter. But we worked on it. IT department was hardworking. They did it. So now we were awarded $1.04 million. As you can see here, and just one example, as one of the GMH staff described, some of us here at GMH, like nurses who does multiple work and then have multiple job descriptions and then do a lot of things. IT department and me, radiology department, we don't work for the sake of the money. They don't pay us enough for what we do. You could not say that enough. We could easily get paid double paid elsewhere or triple case in some cases. But we choose to stay. We choose to stay. You know why? Because we do care. We are committed. So as you can see, their claims are outrageous and disrespectful for someone who's done so much for GMH. This applies not just to me, but other GMH staff who dedicated their lives to the betterment of GMH. I was told that there was a press release saying that it is socially irresponsible of me to speak of such thing, and I disrespected the GMH staff. If any of the GMH staff felt so, I sincerely apologize. That is not my intention. What I believe is it is a social irresponsibility to know that there is a solution to the problem that we face and do nothing about it. What I consider is a social injustice is that you know you're in the position to change something, but you don't protect the ones who are weak, like the people with low income and the GMH staff who's been abused and gone through so much for years. I also heard some physicians are upset because I apparently threw them under the bus by saying the medical record was not getting done. Just to let you know, in a healthcare system and in every institution, it is a known fact we physicians don't do documents on time. It's a common knowledge in any medical center. So that's why, as an administrator and the leaders of the organization, we make sure we follow the rules and ensure there's an accountability. GMH had a wonderful accountability policies, but we were just not following it. That's all. So, again, I sincerely apologize to doctors who took offense and thought that, or told by somebody that I threw you guys under the bus. I did not. What I did in June 11th public hearing was saying that we, as an administrator, did not uphold our own wonderful policy and didn't hold accountability. That is the message. I want to clarify that. So today, I would like to make sure that that is cleared, and I want to thank the dedicated GMH staff and the lives of they led and legacy they left because of what they've done to the betterment of GMH. I also would like to honor Dr. Nicole DeRaj, who recently had the courage to submit her testimony to the legislature. As I did, she also raised multiple issues with management. Unfortunately, her brilliant suggestions were never heard, and she was marginalized and alienated, just as I was. I saw it with my own eyes. She has a PhD, MBA. Look at her CV, and then she publishes so much articles about how to run a hospital in a safe environment. She is a good person to have. As one of the GMH staff said it, she's like the deep discounted good stuff like that you find it at Macy's. That's what we got. It's so lucky for us to have somebody like her. And then why do we not listen to a professional opinion, somebody like her? I'm glad to have yet another chance to testify before you under the oath. Since last week's hearing, many asked me why I did it. Some even discouraged me from coming here today and say this is not wise. But because they won't do anything, so why speak up? I told each one of them that you are absolutely right. Whoever this they is it a GMH administrator or is it the government? I don't know who this they is. You're right, they won't do anything. But that's why I am here. I wanted to do something. This is why we have to do, as the people of this land, have to do something. If we don't act now, we will hand down this fake democracy down to the next generation. God forbid, our daughters and our sons will be retaliated against like we were and live in fear. God forbid, they are tasked to fight this battle instead of me and you because we were too afraid to do anything, because we gave up, say they're not going to do anything, nobody's going to hear us. We grown-ups will fight now for the next generation. This will be the legacy of our generation, my time. Each one of us will take up that responsibilities. Can I count on you on that? I wanted to thank Senator San Nicolas if he was here. I've read everything he's done in the past, and I've noticed his comments on social media defending me and other whistleblowers. Thank you. Your message was also clear, 34th legislatures, that you will never surrender to corruption. Because of somebody like Senator San Nicolas and each one of you, I had the courage to come out of the shadow where I'll continue to live in fear. I think we share the same vision, democracy with integrity. This true democracy is becoming a possibility within our grasp. Democracy with integrity is our absolute goal. We will not accept anything less. I am in full confidence that the people of Guam are in good hands with your leadership. Your diligent approach is needed to end this deep-rooted systematic corruption or incompetency which is inflicting deep wounds into the lives of the people on this island. Thank you, Senator Rodriguez, for being the instrument to pass the resolution for the investigation. I know many GMH staff have been reaching out to you in confidence for over several months now. You protected them, and they knew that they could talk to you in confidence. You were ridiculed perhaps by some of your colleagues and by public because you protected us so much and did not disclose the source. Thank you for being committed to the healthcare of Guam. Senator Torres, Senator Telahi, Senator Nelson, Senator Muna, and Senator Viscos Lee, whether you knew it or not, I found it comfort in having you in front of me at the legislature. I was confident that the women in leadership, such as yourselves, would understand where my heartache was coming from and where my fear was coming from. And I knew I could speak to here as a mother and as a professional and maybe as a friend. I want to thank the rest of the 34th Guam Legislature. Thank you for believing in us who spoke up and stepped up and made our concern known to the public and decided to shed the light. I know who I am. I am not perfect. I am only a human. They will make up allegation towards me. It's coming. I know it. Storm is coming. That's the risk I decided to take. And that's the reason why, even though I was warned here not to return, I came back. I know this for sure. I am not who they say I am. I strive to live my life to be a role model for those little girls everywhere in the world, so that they know even a little girl who grew up so poor in a government project home with nothing much to eat, a girl who grew up in ridicule in a farm village where everyone forbid her to be educated, one day can be a doctor. A little girl can be anything she wants to be in her life. A little girl can be brave and not allow anyone to push her around and be marginalized. So I come here today to show you guys I am not hiding. I am not going away. In fact, it's the opposite. In this political theater, let our true voice be heard and resonate. Let our people be strong. Let Guam be the example of how to end corruption to the world. I stand by my testimony today and always. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shimabukuro. I want to thank you personally as well for your courage and for your honesty that you have been extending to us and to the people of Guam. Mr. Perez? Oh, before we go on, Mr. Camacho, I don't see any of the board members here. Do any of your board members going to be attending tonight's oversight? If we can just make sure we call them and just to remind them that we've asked them to be here as well. Okay, Mr. Perez?
Sure. Well, good evening. I'm here tonight to support Dr. Shimabukuro as a character witness. I've known her in a professional capacity as a former board member for GMH. I'd like to state for the record that I consider her to be of the utmost character. The first time we met, she showed passion, professionalism, as well as humility. She did not try to make everyone know that she knew everything, which is kind of a rare thing to see in a doctor. In board meetings after that, she had always showed the same. But in one of our last board meetings, we were on opposite sides of an issue. And still, at that particular point, she showed nothing but compassion for what she was trying to fight for, as well as professionalism. I looked at the issue from management capabilities, where she looked at it from the patients and what patients are due, those without money. And unfortunately, we couldn't see eye to eye. We still remain on separate sides of the issue. And in the end, we agreed to disagree. And I found that to be extremely powerful. Since then, I've always considered her a friend because she didn't hold back. And after that, we still remained extremely professional and cordial. I now consider her a good friend and would like to urge you to give credit to what she says. Once again, I'm only speaking on behalf of her character and nothing else that has transcribed as far as me being a former board member of GMH. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perez. Dr. Friedman, we'll just go down.
Next slide, please. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, good evening. I'd like to just quote a famous French saying that says, plus il change, plus il reste le même. The more it changes, the more it stays the same. And insanity is performing the same actions and expecting a different outcome. I bring this up because I've been here for 14 years, and quite honestly, I came here and GMH was in a mess, and 14 years later, and seeing it throughout all these 14 years, it's become a bigger mess. So maybe it's not right to say it remains the same. If anything, it's got worse, I think. Next slide, please. I'd just like to give you a little background of myself because I'd like to add a little bit of credence to what I'm saying. I graduated as a member of the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Medical Society from University of British Columbia. I am board certified in all 3 specialties of internal medicine, hematology, and medical oncology. I'm the author or co-author of over 150 published medical manuscripts in the international and American journals of medicine. And I've given many speeches at international meetings on research that I've done. I've held numerous academic ranks, including full professor of medicine as recently as 5 years ago. I'm a member of the American Society of Clinical Oncology, the most revered oncologic association, and I have been since the 1970s when it first started. And I've had experience as a specialist doctor in many cities in Canada, the US, Europe, and Asia. And I think I can talk with a little bit of gravity, if you will, on the knowledge of medicine, what constitutes decent medicine, what constitutes poor medicine. Next slide, please. I just wish to give you a little bit of my background because I'm going to express my own knowledge of what's happened at GMHA since 2004 when I came here. I'm sure you're all aware of the testimonies of Dr. Kasui Shima Bakuru, but you partially heard again today, and Dr. Landstrom from June the 11th. And I'd like to just again give you my feeling on what's happening at GMHA, and also the 2 doctors who testified on June 11th and what we're hearing again tonight. Next slide, please. So the appraisals of Dr. Shima Bakuru and Dr. Landstrom. First of all, Dr. Landstrom is probably the best surgeon overall on Guam and a magnificent surgeon in the microvascular field. He is honest and sincere, and Guam is extremely fortunate to have him here as a doctor. Dr. Shima Bakuru, I think, is extremely well acquainted and versed with most of the aspects of acute medicine, as well as having an excellent insight in assessing and correcting the administrative problems. She's a sincere, honest physician with an incredible patient advocate. And quite honestly, as I've said to her, I don't know why she's wasting her time here, because she has many offers in LA and other places which are far more lucrative and wouldn't have to put up with the stress, although I have asked her many times to stay. Next slide, please. My appraisal of GMHA. I think GMHA is dysfunctional on almost all levels. There's a small group of doctors who control running of GMHA in a regressive way that's out of date, without any self-appraisal, and who control and push an impotent and ignorant administration to do their will, which almost always includes money. They are intolerant to change, newer and more effective methods, and where incompetence is tolerated and ignored, they are very defensive of the status quo and penalize or attack anyone who threatens it. Unfortunately, due to ancient statutes, many of the same doctors are represented on the Board of Medical Examiners, which makes them a very powerful person in the medical community, and certainly able to come down on doctors who try to threaten their status. In the 14 years or so since I've been here, I've seen many an excellent doctor who has come here and tried in vain to correct the system and had the temerity to actually speak up. They've been driven off Guam, basically. And true to form, Dr. Shima Bakuru, after she testified on June 11th, was notified by the current chief of staff that they're going to try and lift her clinical privileges as well. I don't know if you know what it means to have your clinical privileges lifted, but you go onto the National Data Bank, and every time you apply for a job, that National Data Bank comes up and it says you've been stripped of your privileges because of whatever the hospital says you've done. So basically it's kind of a kangaroo court. You have no ability to counter what's on your national record. And a hospital like this can easily do it, and has done it before. And unfortunately has done it for political reasons, Dr. Makritz being one, but they also are supposed to report any malpractice suits, which I understand is not being done. And there's been enough of those with some of the doctors here who work for GMH, by the way. Now, a few rhetorical questions about some of the dealings of GMHA to outline some of the dysfunction that I've seen. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, this is the one. First, how had the OR director been appointed? Was there any advertisement or competitive assessment? As you well know now, this function was cited by the CMS as being an unsatisfactory performance. Why were world medical authorities refused privileges to help with specific patients' care for short, independent procedures, although this is both in the Guam and GMHA statute bylaws? Why were no incident reports ever filed so that there would be review of deficient or dangerous actions and subsequent education to avoid these errors? This was also noted by JACO, by the way. I tried to file numerous incident reports, not one ever made it into the file. Why is there no morbidity and mortality conferences to review all unexpected outcomes or deaths to see if there is any deadly or dangerous actions by staff? This is a standard in every single hospital, Western hospital in the world, and noted as a deficiency by the CMS review. Mistakes are thus hidden. Why was the GMH laboratory until recently, I must say it's changed recently, but I'm talking about history now, allowed to continue in a state of danger, ineptitude, and inability to perform basic safety functions despite numerous complaints and written examples of same? A very talented pathologist came a few years ago to augment and hopefully replace the incompetent pathologist who was then running the service. And after a very short stint here, and after a barrage of complaints by the incompetent pathologist, he left. And why was this allowed to happen? He was writing these things, everyone knew what he was doing, and yet they condoned this. The Cancer Center of Guam had for several years provided an outpatient transfusion service for patients for whom no outpatient facility exists. Why were these transfusions unilaterally suddenly curtailed by the GMHA CEO? This was not Mr. Camacho, by the way, without explanation or response to letters of inquiry. In lieu of 15 to 90 minutes for a transfusion, depending on the type, under direct oncologic nurse and physician control, patients now have to be admitted to GMH, often need to wait hours in the ER for a bed, and spend an overnight in hospital and be exposed in their immunocompromised state to all sorts of resistant bugs. Lest anyone believe that there's a commercial interest in this, we get paid exactly $74 for 1 to 3 units of blood, for which we have to run up to the hospital 3 separate times and takes at least 2 hours of nurses' time. There's no money to be made in it. This is a service that was curtailed by the hospital unilaterally. Why are attempts to speak to Peter John Camacho always ignored? But if one of the clique members answered immediately, I tried to reach Peter John when I was on staff numerous times. He was always in a meeting. He never returned a call. Yet when I was with Dr. Ed Cruz, who called him several times, whenever he was in a meeting, he answered immediately. Why were my privileges withheld on a lie by Mr. Camacho that I had filed my renewal forms late when it was stamped and signed by his secretary, showing that they were sent in 2 weeks, hand-delivered 2 weeks earlier. The then medical director, Dr. Stadler, subsequently admitted that there was political reasons for this and was very embarrassed and apologized to it and said he would put me back on staff if I just signed another form. By this time, I'd had enough with the performances of GMH, some of which you've heard, and I have not attended at GMH since that time. How does the medical director of GMH hold 3 separate government positions and still be able to run a private practice? How do some physicians who've had numerous successful lawsuits for malpractice, both previously to Guam and certainly on Guam, still hold a paid full-time position at GMH and be presented to the population as being a safe and competent doctor? How does a chief of service tell hospitalists to consult one physician over another based on his preference and certainly not on the ability of the physicians? How are some physicians being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for their full-time services to treat patients at GMH, but are still able to see and bill patients privately? Why is GMH paying millions of dollars to physicians just to take call? This is not for their services. I'm sorry, did I not advance it, or it is advanced, I think? Okay. This is not for their services, which they bill separately. They're getting paid millions of dollars to take call, just to be available on the phone and come in if they're called. When they come in and see patients, they are billed privately. The hospital can hire full-time physicians to do the work and bill for the work, turning an asset into a deficit. Sorry, the other way around, turning a deficit into an asset, I'm sorry. But of course, that would not please some of the doctors who run the hospital. A few months ago, I tried to get privileges for my very skilled nurse practitioner. I was told that, amazingly, they didn't have an application form for NPs, although I had a PA who was doing rounds on patients from 2005 to 2008 while she was here. I told Dr. Shimabakuro that at the time. In fact, I think that was the first time that we met. And she said, oh, she'll take care of it immediately. She tells me that within a week she devised an application form, put it on Peter John Camacho's desk 8 months ago, where I think it either still stayed or was thrown in the basket soon after. We've never heard anything from the admin of GMH. Why is there a crippled man walking around in Guam today who had a traumatic amputation at work of 2 or 3 of his fingers? I can't remember the exact story. He came to GMH properly with his fingers on ice, and to have them reattached, which a microscopic surgeon can do easily. He was told there's nobody on Guam who could do this, although Dr. Landstrom was fully available, but he had let his privileges lapse because he was under fire by the administration and doctors of the administration of GMH, much in the line that you've heard here today. As a result, the patient was told nobody could do this. Dr. Landstrom was never called. The patient now was walking around without 2 or 3 of his fingers. This is service to the public. Next slide, please. I believe you have heard and perhaps will hear other testimony by brave people who are sufficiently financially and emotionally secure to not be threatened by a group of dishonest people. The citizens of Guam now look to you as a body to help these beleaguered citizens to proper and sensible medical care. When I came to Guam 14 years ago, a few days after I was here, I asked somebody why something is done in this fashion, and I was told, OOG. I didn't know what it was. Subsequently, I've learned. Please don't let the hospital continue as an OOG.
I want to thank you, Dr. Friedman, also for your testimony today, but also want to thank you for your service to our community. You've served so many of our people, and you coming up today, I want to just thank you again for that testimony. Thank you very much. Mr. Leon Guerrero.
Thank you very much. My name is Ken Leon Guerrero. I'm with Guam Citizens for Public Accountability. And the reason I'm here today is to back up Dr. K's story about climate of fear. Guam Citizens for Public Accountability exists because so many of our citizens, so many government employees would come up to me and ask if I could speak on this subject or on that subject, as you all well know. And I'm here to tell you today that the public is very, very disappointed with the management of Guam Memorial Hospital. If you look at what happened this past year, a destroyer got rammed by a cargo ship. The Navy removed the captain. Another destroyer got T-boned by a tanker. The Navy removed the captain, the executive officer, the officer of the day. And then just recently, a cruiser ran aground on a reef somewhere around Australia. The captain and the executive officer were removed right away because the Navy no longer had faith in their ability to command. The public has no faith in the ability of the current management team at Guam Memorial Hospital to keep them safe. And just sitting here listening to the additional testimony, I'm feeling the rage that they are feeling. There are people out there right now who are comparing Guam Memorial Hospital to Ordot Dump and are trying to find ways that we can get the federal government to step in here and bring in a receiver to clean up the hospital the way they cleaned up the dump, because for 30 years, politicians were unable to do the right thing, the hard thing necessary to clean up the dump until the receiver stepped in. For 30 years, we've been hearing these stories about Guam Memorial Hospital. Nothing has changed. So I'm here today to let you know that the climate of fear talked about by these brave doctors and other people who may be coming up here exists. It's real. We are economic hostages on this island. So the fact that you can threaten somebody's job or threaten a relative's job if they step out of line is a very real threat that's used time and time again on this island. Unless the management of this hospital is completely removed, we have no faith that you're going to be able to prevent CMS from carrying out their threat to withhold federal funding for Medicare and MIP. And considering the fact that about 45 to 50% of the population on this island is Medicare, MIP, and Medicaid dependent, that is a real and dangerous threat to the people of Guam. It's a clear and present danger that we, the people, are not going to tolerate. So we are counting on this body here to step in and do the right thing. And that would be to eliminate the management of this hospital, the entire level of senior management, and put in place a competent management team that would have the ability to convince CMS that we have done what we needed to do. We've replaced the entire senior management team, and now give us an additional 90 days to address these other issues and report back. Because with this election cycle right here, we can't depend on the next governor to do the right thing. And October 3rd is going to be here faster than any of you realize, and it's a date that we in the public are watching very carefully, because so many of us who don't have insurance look at Guam Memorial Hospital as our lifeboat in a healthcare crisis. And the fact that it might not be here through ineptitude, incompetence, political patronage makes us very angry. So I just wanted you to know that the people are watching very carefully what this body does, and we are watching the clock. We do not believe there are times for investigations, hearings, and oversight. We've had investigations, hearings, and oversights for 30 years. The time has come for action. So we in the public are looking at this body to take the action that Adelup won't. And if there's no way for this body to take the action that Adelup won't, then maybe it's time for a federal lawsuit, a class action lawsuit by the citizens of Guam, because our lives are endangered by the incompetence and mismanagement and official misconduct of the administration of Guam Memorial Hospital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leon Guerrero. I want to thank you again, all of you, for being here. I want to ask any of my colleagues if they have any questions for this panel. But before I do that, Mr. Perry, I just have one question for you. How long have you served on the board?
You know, I'm trying to think about that. I believe it's around 2 years.
And from what date to what date, sir?
I don't know. I'd have to look back at that.
Okay. So my question is, how involved is the board, during your time, how involved is the board in the operations of the hospital?
Well, I was there for 2 separate boards. I was there under Lee Weber's chairmanship, and then when he and 2 other board members had left, I stayed on, along with Dr. Terlahi and a couple others, so that we can bring in enough to make quorum to have board meetings. How involved were we? As far as operations go? Not.
So were you provided information on a regular basis as a board?
We were given some information. It wasn't in writing most of the time, and the credibility of the information, I'm not certain, but yes, we were given some things, but it came from within the administration.
In your opinion, were information withheld from the board?
I wouldn't know. I made decisions at every board meeting based on the information I was given, but also because I wasn't the chairman, I wasn't sure exactly what we were given, if it was all, and I assumed that what we were given to make decisions on was valid.
Okay, thank you. Any other senator have any question for this panel? Speaker, did you have a question for this panel? Vice Speaker?
Thank you. I just want to thank all of you for your testimony, and I particularly wanted to thank Dr. Shimabukuro and Dr. Friedman. I know it must be very difficult, I think, because I share the same concerns that doctors, speaking about doctors and about the hospital, I mean, it's going to cause great concern to the patients. So I just want you to know that we hear you and that we intend to do everything we can to, like Mr. Leon Guerrero says, I also agree with that, to get to some resolution and as quick as we can. That's really what we need to do. Unfortunately, I don't think we have a doctor on our team right now, but with you and the entire community's expertise, I'm sure we're going to be able to solve this quickly. And I know you may not even think that's possible after many, many years, but I, like you, still have hope, and I think we can do it. So we're going to work very hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Ogden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to first of all begin my statement by thanking you for certainly your perseverance in this particular issue, because Dr. Shimabukuro, by virtue of her coming out last week, certainly changed at least from my perspective, changed my view of some of the things in terms of specificity. Your professionalism, your credence, your ability to come forward, knowing full well that there could be repercussions, certainly, in my opinion, from my perspective, has changed my mindset in terms of looking at how aggressively we can proceed with this. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for certainly recognizing some of the need for an investigation into the things that are taking place since February. I want to ask just a general question, and any of you can answer this. I know that I wanted to present it to management, but knowing full well management's responses in the last week, I think it's best that I ask you all, because Mr. Leon Guerrero, in your case, you highlighted there's got to be an immediate change. There's got to be a system in place or an oversight that would ensure compliance with existing laws, rules, and regulations in the administration of GMH. This idea about a temporary receiver, any of you can respond. Self-inflicted temporary receiver, change in management, wholesale change, and allowing that process to proceed. Any comments or response from any of you as to how that could benefit GMH? Because we know that the financial burden in the short term may be tremendous, but if we're talking about a long-term fix, with regards to how GMH is administered, then certainly that could be a consideration. So can I just hear some feedback, please?
Well, the general feeling among the people is that the sales tax set up specifically to support GMH is going to be like pouring, money in a bottomless pit. Because until the organization is changed structurally, starting at the top, there's no guarantee from the public's perspective that any of the changes or improvements that need to be done will be done, because they haven't been done. And I'll just close my thought on that by saying, if there is going to be a temporary receiver put in place, it had better be somebody that has the competence, credentials, and reputation that will buy time from the public. They have to be so credible that the public will say, okay, this guy, when we look at the credentials and the reputation, where he's been, what he's done, we believe this person may be the one that will be able to do it. Other than that, the mood in the public is right now, let's have the federal government bring in the hospital equivalent of GBB. Because we all saw what happened in a matter of weeks when GBB came into town and took over the landfill. And the fact that people are comparing Guam Memorial Hospital to an ORDOT dump should tell you what the reputation of the existing management team is in the community. Now, I'm not talking about the people working in the hospital. I'm talking about the management team, because the management team sets the tone for everybody else. I'm not saying everybody in the hospital is a saint or a sinner, but when we get a decent management team in, the first job of that management team is going to be to high grade the personnel working in that facility. So we in the public are looking at the receiver or a new top-level management team with integrity, credentials, reputation, and qualification, because this is our lifeboat. You know, we can't go to GRMC because we don't have insurance. Look back when GRMC first opened and they turned away a difficult labor because she was MIP. Well, we can't afford to take that risk. And this economy has not grown enough that the benefits have spread out to the rest of the people. So as long as the majority of the population of Guam is economic refugees who are dependent on Medicare, Medicaid, and MIP, then it is your job to make sure we have the best management team in place that we could possibly have. But you got that ticking time bomb of October 3rd that you're sitting on. You have got to do this fast, and you have to do it right the first time in order for you to have any credibility with JCO or CMS to be able to get the amount of time necessary. You're only going to be able to buy time with competence. This management team has already demonstrated to JCO and CMS they're incompetent. Nothing this management team is going to be able to do will fix the problems because they haven't fixed them. So that's why you're going to need to bring in a new management team, bring it in fast, show CMS that we mean business. We are going to take this report and we're going to execute it, but you need to give us a little time. And I think if you start with a new team, that will give you the credibility to go back to CMS and say, we heard you. The people of Guam have heard you. And we are going to make sure that the people of Guam are well served by this hospital, starting with this step, this team. Now, this is what we're asking for in return.
Hear, hear. Sorry, I meant to say hear, hear is a little bit close. No, I read this piece in the Post today, your very excellent piece, and I agree 100% with you. I think that's the most articulate statement I've heard on the hospital in a long, long time. And I think the only way to do this, as Mr. Leon Guerrero says, is not by change, but by wholesale change. And I Personally, because time is short, I would put Dr. Shimabukuro in to run the place, to choose her team, leave her alone for 6 months to do what she wants, no political interference at all, come back in 6 months and see what's happened. Because you don't have time, and you can't find very excellent people in that short a time. You're certainly not going to find them on Guam, I think. And, you know, when you pay a salary that's a third, a fifth, a tenth of what CEOs are getting on the mainland, no one's going to come for that. And, you know, you've got to triple the salary of a CEO and say, my God, that's $400,000 more than he's making now. Yeah, but how many millions is he losing? And, you know, pound wise, penny wise and pound foolish just doesn't win. And I've seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now 6 CEOs since I've been here. The ones who fought for change have been indicted or fired and can't get a job. There's 2 of them. And the rest just plod and do nothing. That's the history of what's going on there.
Thank you for your statements. I believe the aspect with regards to it has to be inclusive of the expertise and the management skills to be able to run a hospital, and also be removed from politics. Those are two real takeaways in regards to your responses. So thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'd like to address your short-term, long-term solution. When I started with the board, the hospital was using a paper record system and a paper billing system. And when I tried to run down how all the information was being received from admission to doctor's visits to order entries to billing, I couldn't get the right answers. It seemed as if nobody was talking to each other. But while I was on the board, we moved over to this electronic medical record system, which all of the order entries are supposed to be done on a computer system. One of the systems that was supposed to be put into that as well was the billing. So anytime a doctor makes an order, it would automatically know to bill it. It's on a computer system. There's no human intervention on this one. When it was a paper record system, I'll tell you right now, there is no short fix. Guam, or GMH, there really isn't a short-term solution. I would agree with all of management when they say that, you know, we are not making enough revenue to cover the expenses. That's pretty well known. To what extent, we don't know. I tried to find it, and all I got was kind of the runaround. And I was a board member at the time. With the new system, it should be pretty clear. I have not looked at it. I since resigned my post as a board member prior to implementation of the billing part of the system. I had experience with implementation of a previous system at another clinic, and the fact that I was trying to advise administration about the hardships of it and underestimating it, and they said, sure, we got it, and they dropped the ball tremendously, made me think they had no credibility. But I'm not going to say that they don't know what they're doing. They had to run with it. They had to implement it. If it is implemented now, great. I don't know just what the numbers look like, though. I haven't seen them. But there really isn't going to be a short-term fix. I think that if there is a fix, it's going to be a lot of work and may require a substantial investment of be it time, effort, energy. I don't know. It's going to require a lot. And it's going to be rough.
Okay. Thank you. Doc?
2 things for me. I think bringing in the outside non-affiliated politically and also a real expert to run the hospital would do us good. I'm not talking about, I want this job. I'm leaving. It's inevitable I have to leave with all the retaliation that I'm getting, unfortunately. There is a consulting firms just made for health administration to capture revenue and foster a culture of safety. There are people who do this professionally and very much with integrity. So we should reach out to that. Second things, it is still the truth that GMA still need funding right now, today, because the years of the mismanagement or inefficiencies. They're gonna need your help on that. Their electric panel is about to go out. It's 40 years old. It will be a devastation for this island. It's about $6 million. They're going to need that. They're going to need the EHR, electric health record, that is, to capture more revenue and then monitor the revenue cycle management more closely and be quick about their billings and then responding to denial and whatnot. That's about $23 to $30 million. That's going to be a lot of money that they're going to need at first in order for them to get to that healthy state. But as a doctor, I know health is not achieved in one day. And this is something as a community that we need to walk towards healing emotionally and also fiscally as a responsibility to the people. I think there is a short-term solution that you must have to make sure that you protect us from coming forward. There is a lot of employees within GMH who is texting me right now and after the last whole week saying that thank you to me. So I know I'm not alone. People are asking for help from you guys. You're in that position to help and come up with the solution. By no way that I am saying that they don't need money, so forget about it. It's the opposite. They're in jeopardy because we've mismanaged it years. So do help us.
Thank you very much, Doc. Just for everyone's information, a few years ago, this body had passed a law, which we didn't have to, that mandated that we go out for a request for information to enter into some sort of public-private partnership. And even one of the questions was to privatize management, to get outside group to run the hospital where we take out that political influence. I see Mr. Ross is here. I know that they did receive responses, and so perhaps that's one of the questions that we can ask him when he comes forward later, because that's something that's been out there, however, that has not been pursued by this administration. Okay, so thank you very much for being here. I want to call Dr. Shea, but just one more thing, Dr. Shimabukuro. Since you've come out during the last testimony, have you ever been notified of an internal review committee to look into your claims?
No, I have not been reached out by the CEO, Peter John Camacho, nor anybody from the administration to discuss any of the matters that I brought up. And there is no invitations to speak why I was removed from the administrative position. Only things that I know what they stand for is what they said to the press, that I am a disgruntled employee. And nobody in the right mind will be disgruntled employee if you were given my position, that you get to keep the title, you get the full pay, and do nothing. It's a vacation. Why would I be unhappy? Only reason I spoke out is because the reason that was done behind it. It was done to keep me away from something. That's something you have to find out for yourself. I think I know, but I will comply with all the evidences and then be truthful 100% with you guys when you conduct investigations of what I know to be true. I am not who they say they are. They have not reached out to me to do this, to invite me in any discussion or engage me in any forms of amendment thus far.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll dismiss this panel. Dr. Shea?
Is it just myself? Don't put me up here alone, jeez.
Is there anyone else?
Come on up, anybody.
And then after, we'll call the GMH management.
All right,
after.
okay. Thank you, senators. And I've been patient enough to wait, so I think my patience at the hospital is cooperative right now. So let me just get to the couple of points here that I wanted to clarify. I'm sorry that I wasn't here last week, I delivered 54 patients last month at GMH, and I delivered, I think, over 30 just this month, and the month's not over, so that's quite a bit. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand the reason I'm here is because I want to just offer some clarity so that the public is able to understand it better. Because all we talked about is the bad things about Guam Memorial Hospital, but without regard to the good things that we've done, okay? So, my name is Dr. Thomas Shea, and I think majority know me already. I've been here for 22 years. I've seen a lot of senators come and go, and a lot of new faces come in, and some go as well. And I've been keep tossing and turning on how I should start with my clarification so I don't sound like I'm trying to attack somebody. That's not my point of being here. And I'm not trying to attack the quote-unquote whistleblower. I mean, if you want to call whistleblower, I've been whistleblowing to you guys for years. Right? I've been to this legislature body, not just the 34th, but I think the 33rd, the 32nd. For the last 22 years, I think I've been in here, in and out, for many, many years. So if you want to consider a whistleblower, I'm probably the most prominent whistleblower there is on Guam. Right? And I think Jerry Rojas, who is sitting right there, is probably texting somebody about me. Oh, Dr. Shea is whistleblowing again. But be as it may, I think I want to be germane to what we're talking about today. You call an oversight hearing on labor and delivery and the organizational, I think, function for the hospital. So let me just start, if I could, by advocating for the women and children. I think labor and delivery has been long overdue. I think we're doing a good job in holding the four walls of the hospital together in labor and delivery. And that's the good part about Guam Memorial Hospital, and I want the public to understand that. Our OBGYN department for women's health is probably the best on Guam. We get referrals from off-island, we get referral from the Naval Hospital, we get referral from GRMC. And we still are doing a very good job. And I want to compliment my colleagues, OBGYNs who are here today, and for the nurses that's been helping me out day in and day out without sleep. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that. So again, if I'm going to whistleblow, I'm going to say, hey, this has not been completed. It's a project that we started off 4 years ago, and it's still not done. And I know that GITA put out another ad for RFP today or yesterday. I haven't really seen it yet, but I heard about it. But that's just another RFP to get financing. But I would encourage the legislature to look at other ways of funding this project because, 2,000 babies are delivered, but over 2,500 moms come through Guam Memorial Hospital. And that's the heart and soul of GMH. I haven't heard Dr. Shimabukuro talk about labor and delivery. I haven't heard Vern Perez complaining about labor and delivery of women's health. And it seems like that is a soul, heart, and soul, the good things of what's going on with Guam Memorial Hospital. But it doesn't mean that nothing should be done. Okay? It's just because there's no complaints, no citations by CMS, no citations by Joint Commission, it doesn't mean that we don't need the renovation with labor and delivery. We have to get that renovated. And I'm here again, I'm a whistleblower, okay? That seems like the term that the legislature loves today. The media loves the term whistleblower. So I'm whistleblowing, let's get this done for labor and delivery, please. Okay, never mind the RFP issues and stuff with GITA. I think we need to find a source of funding. Don't just put all the trust in GITA to get this done because they failed over many, many years. Okay, so that's my testimony on, you can read up on the history of my written testimony on the maternity ward, okay? And that's been over the last 4 years. And I'm not gonna be here to talk about my credentials either. I know the other speakers spent several slides talking about their board certifications, their appointment to university professorships. I have that as well, but I'm not gonna sit here and go through all those slides. It would take me 3-4 hours to do that. So I don't think I need to justify my credentials to a lot of the senators in this room. But I will say that, doctors do come and go, right? And I'm one doctor that I'm still here. No matter how bad the situation at GMH, I've seen it. I've seen it at a time where I need a suture, and I don't have the suture that I need. So I have to make shift in using a different type of suture to stop the artery from bleeding. I've seen it. It's not just 2 years ago, but 10 years ago, in a different administration, in a different legislature. And I came here to talk to you about it. I just don't have the old laptop to pull it back up because it just died on me. But, so be as it may. I just want to offer some clarification, okay? I've read the so-called whistleblowers medical staff package, the letter, and I was reading through it, and it's about 11 pages, but I think on the first page, it noticed that when a doctor, for example, applies for privileges at a hospital, let's say a new doctor comes in. When I first came in with the United States Navy, I have to apply for the hospital privileges. And the forms that I fill out is quite extensive forms. And I noticed that in the testimony is, on the first page, on staffing physicians, I need to offer some clarification because it is not true. It's just not true. It's noted here that, I also noticed this person wrote that there's open privileges at GMH. A doctor or whatever physician asks, a physician gets. When I apply for privilege at Cedars-Sinai or Loma Linda, they may return numbers of cases, institutions, etc. I was never asked of such details when I myself applied for GMH privileges. It may be true for that one particular person, but I went to the medical staff office and I pulled up the facts. And the fact is, the medical staff appointment, which I have right here, and this was just recent, and when you turn into the staffing appointments, can I have a staff member to maybe provide these to the senators and you just read it? This is so there's no, you can read how many deliveries that I do, but there is a number, there's a column on there where you put the number of cases that a doctor does. You don't want to make copies of it, you can just show it to them. But that's just my private files. But I don't mind sharing it with you. But don't make copies and distribute it throughout. Don't give it a PDN. All right? But just take a look at it. I just want you to look at the form that we have. But if you want a blank form, you can always ask GMH. But if you look at the second column of that, the second column, it says, requested privileges, yes. Number of cases over the last 2 years. You give an estimated number of cases that you've done. Core privileges. When I train as a board-certified OBGYN, just core privileges that we do. I'm able to do hysterectomies. I'm able to do certain procedures. I'm able to do normal delivery, complex deliveries, etc., etc. Now, there are certain procedures that I'm able to do, but very rare cases. For example, a cesarean hysterectomy. When a mom is, delivering a baby that she's hemorrhaging out, and we have no choice but to remove the uterus. Or doing a C-section, for example, we have to take out the uterus. So those are procedures that are very rare. And we only see that maybe one case or two cases in a year or even 2-3 years down the road. So in those cases, we want privileges, but we put 0. But it doesn't mean that I don't know how to do it. But I have to apply for those privileges in order to save a life of a mom if those situations occur. Am I making myself clear? So the testimony of the person who says, a doctor asks and gets whatever he wants, and they don't ask for numbers of deliveries or whatever procedure they do. That's just wrong. Is my alarm going off? Maybe I'm hearing somebody else's alarm. I hope I still have more time, right? Because the other speakers took a lot of time. So I just want to make a clarification on that very first page. I'm not going to take every single page and dissect it, but I wanted to offer some clarification so that you know the facts. So those are the facts, okay? So when you're done with that, make sure I get it back, all right? Now, the second thing about quality management, I noticed that it continues on, and it talks about, and it's bolded about quality management issues here. Utilization review, for example. GMH policy, we review policies all the time. In fact, I think we review more policies than the hospitals that I have been at in Hawaii. And we're constantly updating those policies. But I noticed that someone said that, we haven't updated a policy in 2009. Well, there may be a few policies that we have not reviewed, or we review, but the policy is the same. Then we review, but we update it with a number that says 2018 review. But we don't change the policy because nothing has changed. We keep the same policy. But if we're going to change a policy, then we have to go through the committee to do it. So we are doing those reviews. So for somebody to say we haven't updated policies at all, that's a little, misrepresenting a little bit there. And then it goes on to say on the second page that, utility review, and you talk about denial of MFICU and of all care. That's not true, I think insurance companies, you have to take it with a grain of salt. For example, if I were to do a procedure and I submit my bill to an insurance company, the insurance company may deny my billing and ask for questions, ask for documentations, and sometimes we'll get into a little argument here and there, but we show them the documentations and try to talk to them, And eventually they will say, okay, fine, we'll pay you. But when you talk about denials and stuff, it's not uncommon that it happens to other hospitals and also to clinics as well. All right? Now, the midnight rule, I won't even explain that to you. I think you can talk to the management about the midnight rule. I'm not going to even talk about that. But risk management, here's the thing. It says risk management. I noticed the risk management GMH was very weak. Now, that's a blanket statement. I don't think GMH risk management is weak. As far as I know, for example, if there was a mom who was bleeding to death or something and something happens, we review those charts. Risk management pulls those charts. There's certain protocol and criteria that we follow to make sure that, hey, why is this patient or what happened to this baby? Those are all reviewed and those are all pulled out. Now, that statement kind of blankets us all. So I don't like that. I think if you're going to talk, if you're going to whistleblow, you got to be specific because, I think it's unfair to blanket also. I think we do have good doctors at Guam Memorial Hospital. We do have good staff. So not all of us are bad. And I'm sure that the other doctors, even the whistleblower, will tell you that not all doctors are bad. Okay? So I don't like that blanket statement that risk management is very weak. It's not. It is not. Okay? If you go down to the Joint Commission area and citing of a CDC, sir, you got to ask the specific person that. I'm not going to go into that. Now, it goes into the area about billing errors, billing and coding. It's talked about Ed Burns' physical projects, and so you're going to have to talk to those people about that. That's written, but in general, when you talk about billing and coding errors, again, there is billing and coding errors with every hospital. No matter what you do. Even my office, we make billing errors. So we have to catch that, we correct that. And the person here says they don't correct the mistakes. I really doubt it because I just, when I'm at medical records, I get a call from, hey, Dr. Shea, did you do a C-section or did you do a vaginal delivery on this particular mom? Because we have to make sure we bill correctly. And I said, let me take a look because I delivered 54 babies last month. I don't remember. So they call me up. The billing department and the medical records calls me up and say, hey, come on down, so we need to straighten this out. So that process is in place. So to say that we don't code properly or mistakes are made and not being corrected, that's not true because they call me personally to come down to check whether or not I did a proper procedure. And that's just one sheet of paper that the medical record gets because when they dig a discharge, there's a summary of discharge. And that summary of discharge, if a doctor is so busy, they will make an error that says, hey, but the process that GMH and billing and medical records are very good. You can ask any of the doctors, when we go to the medical records, the pages are tagged with little sticky notes. And I think they spend too much money on those sticky notes. I'd rather than not use it, period. But they do have them. But with electronic records, I'll talk a little bit about that later on. The electronic records actually is very good at Guam Memorial Hospital. So I think I encourage the former board of trustees to perhaps give me a call and I can talk to him about what we've done since he's left. I don't know when he was left. He left the board of trustees, but I certainly would encourage him to give me a call because I'm still at GMH. So billing errors, I would say that it's not uncommon. It does occur, but there is cross-checks, and I just told you personally as a witness that they did call me down to make sure that the billings are correct. Okay? So that's, again, a blanket statement that I don't, I'm trying to take that not too personally. But anyway, if you go down to the other area about medical records, oh my goodness, that is a touchy topic for me. It's on social media as well. When you say physicians don't do their records, and that's the reason why there's $22 million out there that's unbilled due to physicians. Now, I take that personally because I'm there every week. And, last night I only slept for 3 hours, and I still go into medical records daily. But let me tell you something about medical records. No matter how many times I go into medical records, okay? If I go in right now and I finish all my records, I guarantee you, by Monday next week, Dr. Shea, you have more records. And the reason that's the case is because I will deliver another baby tomorrow, the next day, and the mom that I delivered today is not going to get into medical records until she's discharged from the hospital. And that chart, electronic records, I will sign, everything is in there. But there's certain areas in the medical records that is not done electronically, still on the paper. And that's same with other hospitals as well. But it doesn't mean that it's stuck in billing. The hospital can still bill for facility charges. The one thing that we've done very well with electronic record is that I'm able to access. In fact, I'm able to log into Guam Memorial Hospital's record from here. From here. If Senator, again, if you're in a hospital right now, I'm able to log in from here, and I'm able to check your labs. I'm able to check your blood pressure. Because that's how efficient now that we are at the hospital. Initially, I hated it. Oh, God, I hated it because I had to go to training and do that. In fact, I had to buy a new computer because it only works with PC up there. This is the Apple, sorry. So you can't log in with an Apple. You have to get a PC. But I'm just giving an example of how efficient that we've become because I'm able to look at patients' chart and records online and from home. And that adds to it. But so I think you have to take everything that's said, from speakers previously with a little grain of salt. Oh, I forgot to also say a disclaimer that I'm not paid by GMH, by the way. I'm not under salary, period. I don't get paid a dime. So I'm not here to protect this. I'm not here to protect Peter John. I'm not here to protect Benita. I'm here to offer a clarification so that you can understand from a different perspective that really what I'm trying to do is to give you a better understanding of the system. Are you still with me? Okay. Now, going back to the medical records part, let me just tell you how important this is, okay? And this is a policy that I pulled from GMH. This one you can have, because I think this is what Senator Aggie is laughing at me. Where's my record? You still have it? Oh my God, you're reading everything that I did. Senator Espadon, do you have any questions on my privileges? Okay. But anyway, why don't we, this is an important paper for you because it's important because on the accusations before regarding medical records and doctors not doing their records, and I think the person came out and admitted that, hey, that's a common area that doctors have a hard time finishing their records because, when you have 3 hours to sleep and you're doing all this surgery in the daytime, paper is the last thing you want to do. But we do a good job at the hospital. There is a protocol that we follow, and that's in the policy and procedures. And you get a first notice to complete your charts within 9 calendar days after discharge. That's your first notice. Second notice, you get a second notice, and I won't read it complete. You get a second notice if you don't finish it within a certain time period. And then finally, you get a third notice. A third notice means that you have to finish your chart in 48 hours. 48 hours. And there's really no exception to this rule. And that's what I hate. But let me tell you something. When I had my appendicitis, okay, I was admitted to the hospital on the 4th floor. And you can ask Dr. Kia Romani about this. He was a general surgeon, and Dr. Lim was anesthesia. I got a third notice when I was in the hospital. And I was on IV, and I was sick as a dog, okay? You can ask my wife as well. But I got a third notice when I was up there in my bed. I thought I was going to die, but I didn't die. I'm still here. But you know what I did? I told the nurse, help block my IV. I went downstairs to finish my records. You know why? Because if I didn't finish my records within that 48-hour period, I would be suspended. There was no exceptions. So I suggest the policy, whoever made this policy, to throw this policy away and add an exception. If the doctor is sick, come on, make an exception that don't give him a third notice when he's on the bed at the hospital. Give him an exception that, hey, it's okay. When you get well, come back in a week to finish your records. And guess what the records was? Oh, thank you. The record was basically just missing a signature. Just missing a simple signature for an order or something like that. It was nothing to do with billing. You can still build a chart, no problem. But it was just a signature that was missing. It was a few. It wasn't too many at all. So luckily I did that, went back up, hooked my IV bat, and got my medications. So everything went well at that time. But I just want to give you an example to offer some clarity that medical records are being done and that it's not all physicians, okay? If you're going to pick on this medical record issue, you identify those doctors who's not doing their record. But be as it may, we have doctors that are sick. We have doctors that have prostate cancer. We have doctors that have breast cancer. We have doctors that have brain cancer. We have doctors that's very sick, diabetes. They have open heart surgery, So you have to understand that doctors are human as well. So when somebody just says, generalization just says, hey, physician not committing their record, and this is why not billing. That's not true. Okay? And I think that was back in 2014 or something like that. And in 2014, I don't think we had electronic records. So if you go to medical records today, I think you see a different area of medical records. Very few charts left. Very few charts left. I think I beat that to death, so you can keep this. You can make copies and have it. All right? All right. Let's get back to this. Oh, okay. Let's go on to the next part. And I'm not going to get into the personal issues, regarding the whistleblower and the personal issues. Again, I think some of them are personal issues. And, like billing direct to the patients, those arenas. Why would a doctor that's working for the hospital and bill to the patients, etc.? That is something that the management will have to talk to you about. I don't know much about that. But I do know the accusations out there is that why is a certain doctor being paid by the hospital and he has a private practice, for example? And let me just offer you some clarity on that. House call, for example, is required by CMS, okay, Medicaid, Medicare. In order to qualify for that, you have to have a list of on-call physicians. And the list of on-call physicians has to be categorized by different specialties, including OBGYN, including pediatrics, including surgeons, etc. Now, unless you're going to tell me that you're going to hire a hospitalist that's going to be 24/7 every single day, I think it's not an easy task. Like I said, doctors on Guam come and go. If you ask me to take call at the hospital, I would tell you that's almost impossible. Impossible. I cannot deliver 54 babies. On top of that, you want me to take house call. I'll be delivering 100 babies. I wouldn't be here. I'll be back in ICU or somewhere, but that's just impossible. So what you do is that you create position to take house call, and you compensate the doctors based on the number of days that you're on call. But those days that you're not on call, you're able to take care of patients outside in your clinic. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't see anything wrong with that at all. As long as their job is done at the hospital as required for them to do as a house physician. As far as salaries go, I don't know how that is calculated, but I do know that some salaries are very fair, and I do know that some salaries are astronomical. And I don't know. I know, for a doctor to be paid over $700,000, that's quite high. And, staffing pattern is online. So you have to look at that and say, why is this doctor paid so much versus another doctor? And those are things that I can't really comment on. But I can just tell you, I'll offer some clarity for you. You can ask me questions later if you want. But, don't punish a doctor who's taking house call doing their job, but they do have their private clinics. I think that's okay, as long as their job to the hospital is done properly and it's not harming any patient care or they're not showing up to work. I think that's something that you understand. And that's the same with Hawaii, by the way. Hawaii has doctors who take calls at Queens, for example. My colleagues, when I trained there at Queens, they take call, but they compensate them by the hourly or they compensate by the days that they call. But then when they're off call, they go to their own clinic or they do whatever they want. So they're not part of the quote-unquote full-time staff, but they are, taking call for the hospital. You still follow? Speaker Benjamin Cruz, you okay? All right. Almost done. All right. And then the comment, I know that a lot of times when people up here to talking about their volunteer service, for example, I don't know why that's even a testimony about volunteer service, the philanthropy. They give lectures at UOG, at GCC. I do that all the time. But if I'm sitting here and in my testimony talking about the lectures that I do, the nurses that I teach in my clinic, and to justify my credentials to you, then something's wrong. Okay, I don't think I need to do that. Philanthropy, for example, I don't need to talk about that. I think you see what I do in the community, and I think we give back to the community what we need to do, but I don't need to sit here and tell you what I do. Anyway, Let's just go to the next page. So I'm not going to sit and go through all that because almost half of this testimony that's been given previously, almost half of them are all, hey, I did this, I'm great, these people talk about me, I'm wonderful, etc. I'm going to skip all that. I want to get to the areas where I think the senator that you need to understand, and that's the operational status of the hospital. The clashes of opinions, that is something that's personal. I think they need to work that out. And you know, there's an organization here called what, Enough Malik, right? If you can't work it out, you know, get in touch with Pat Wolf and just sit in the room and talk it out and get along. Because when we sit here, we talk about, hey, we want to work together, we want to do this, we want to make sure we improve. I heard Senator Terlahi, I heard Dennis Rodriguez says, thank you very much for coming out here. You have a lot of courage. Well, have some courage and call Pat Wolf and get these people into the room and just work it out. You know, if there's any personal issues, sit down and talk it over. All right? Now, I want to also say that, and this is something that I also told the management, and they'll tell you, I call them and I will tell them how I feel. All right? And I've even told some of the senators how I feel. I disagree with them taking a picture in front of the hospital and doing a press release. I told them, hey, I don't think you should do that. Joint Commission, etc. Don't take a picture in front of the hospital and paint it that way because, you know, you're blanking the whole hospital again. So, you know, they may hate me if I say that, but like I said, I'm not here to defend them. I'm just telling you. And I'm just going through this testimony. And then I know that some other people have another testimony to do, so let me go back, print it out, and I ask for copies, then I can come back, and I can give you some more clarity on what they've said. All right? So, disagreement on finances. I think the finances, I think we all agree that GMH needs funding. That's just a no-brainer. But what I'm here to make sure is that don't stop funding GMH just because you consider somebody out here that's a whistleblower and say, hey, you know, they're mismanaging this, mismanaging that. Let me tell you, don't allow me to be in another situation like years before where I ask for a stitch and I don't get the stitch that I want or the suture that I need. Don't let that happen again, okay? Because we do a good job. We have good doctors, we have good nurses, we have good staff there. So don't allow any testimony here today or in the future to tell you don't fund GMH because somebody is mismanaging it, okay? Don't do that. If you're going to do that, you might also put me as a CFO, but I don't have the degree to do it. But I do run my own clinic, and I make sure monies are spent in appropriate arenas. All right? All right. Now, I'm almost done with this. It's 11 pages, so I got to kind of go through there. Let's see here. The Board of Trustees. There is no getting away from any kind of political interference from a GMH. I know we talk about trying to get rid of political interference. I know Senator Agin, you brought that up. You have to put a team there, there's no political. How do you do that with a public hospital? How do you do that? You know, that's very difficult if you think about it. I mean, under the Government Organic Act, the governor is really in charge of the hospital, right? And I've been here so long, I think 1 year, Governor Carl Gutierrez actually kicked out the whole Board of Trustees, that he was the sole Board of Trustees. I think that happened once before, right? Yeah, so this is how long I've been on Guam, so I think I'm getting a little gray hair. But as far as retaliation, I know that whenever somebody brings up retaliations or forced removal, etc., I also heard that, the speaker before talk about how much they love taking care of kids, how much they love taking care of patients, etc. Like I said, doctors, real doctors, we don't like paperwork. We don't like being put in an administrative role. If I love doing paperwork, I'll be applying for medical director position right now. In fact, I try to do that. I asked to be paid $1. I think Peter John or Joe Verga, I think I sent the email. I still have the email, by the way. For $1, I'll do the work, but I can't, I just can't do it. But be it as it may, I think there was some talk about retaliation and some talk about changing job descriptions, etc. Let me tell you something about physicians that's hired at the hospital. When you're hired on, I don't know, maybe the manager can tell you, but when you're hired on as a non-classified position or like a GG1 status or like a private contractor, for example, your boss, can assign you wherever you want. They can change your job description whenever they want you to. You don't have to accept. If you don't want to accept it, you can quit. But I told Benita, I think when the Joint Commission came out, when they were here asking for funding, when I emailed, a lot of you senators that don't increase the taxes. I don't like tax. I hate GRT, by the way, okay? Because I think that's an unfair tax, the regressive tax. And I support changing the GRT to a complete sales tax, just waive it out, because everybody will be fair. Because you waive entities to not pay GRT, and we have to pay it. And how do we recruit doctors or nurses to our own clinics when other clinics or other hospitals have GRT waivers? It's just, you can't compete with that. You can't. So when you talk about finances, and I think that's the time that I mentioned that, anyway, the tax is a different arena. But when you talk about promotion, demotion, retaliations, I think it's important to know that when a doctor, and I think I read the testimony before, that they love taking care of patients, but when you're reassigned or asked to say, hey, don't do any more administrative work, for example. And I told Benita, we got too many administrators at GMH. I need more doctors. I need more nurses at bedside taking care of patients. And that's very true. That's really what we need. We don't need any more administrator. We don't need associate or assistant administrator. If you're an administrator, do the job yourself. Don't have an assistant to an assistant and then another assistant to another assistant. Why is that the case, right? Don't do that. I don't know who's that clapping, but I need to keep talking. But be as it may, what I'm trying to tell you is that I'm trying to encourage the whistleblower to don't think of that as a demotion. Don't think of that as a retaliation. Because if somebody tells Dr. Shea, I don't want you to do any more administrative work. I want no paperwork. Go and take care of patients. You know what I would say? Thank you. I would say thank you very much, because that's what I'm trained to do, and I'm going to go and take care of patients, because that's what I like to do, is taking care of patients. And if somebody tells me that, I don't think that's retaliation. I don't think that's a demotion. I would have them try to think of it in a different manner, And if I have a chance, I'll talk to her as well. But, those are the things that I want to make sure that's brought up from a different perspective, okay? Because if you love taking care of patients, why would you consider that as retaliation or demotion? You shouldn't. It shouldn't. Okay. I think I'm up to the last page here. Let me see. All right, and then I think the couple of pages here, there's some personal issues about sex abuse, drug abuse, and someone said this, she said this, and all that. It's a lot of hearsay in the testimony. I really don't like that, when that kind of testimony and under oath in the legislature, because those are generalizations and hearsay, because I can say, you told me that last night. I can say, you told me that yesterday, and those are not real true testimonies that I like to hear. If you're going to say it, you say it, identify the source of what you're going to say. Because you're not talking to PDN. You're not a reporter that says, I want to protect my source. No, it's not that. If you're going to do something, you got to do something right and identify the person. There's also a statement here regarding CEO being allowed to look at clinical privileges, etc. The CEO of the hospital is a very important position. And I have no idea why Peter John is still there. I don't know why he don't quit. That's a thankless job, okay? Because you get hit left and right. But I think the CEO does have a right to look at a physician's chart if there's any issue that comes up, because overall, you want to be aware of what's going on. You want to make sure that you have access to that. As far as the suspension goes, for example, in here, it says that the hospital administration pardoned doctors or something like that for suspensions. Man, I would love to have a pardon if I was when I had my appendicitis and I had to do my medical records, but I didn't. But in that piece of paper they gave you, did you pass it out yet? No. That's an important piece of paper, right here. Anyway, in this piece of paper, this is facts. I'm only giving you facts, okay? If you look at section, I circled it for you. Yeah. Section E and also Section, I think, F. It says right there, who can suspend doctors, okay? It's not Peter John, it's not the administration, it's the chief of medical staff, okay? And that's a fact. The chief of medical staff is a physician. It's not an administrator, and definitely it's not Benita, but it's an elected position by all the doctors, okay? And there's a medical executive committee that oversees that. And that chief of staff is the person who signs the notices out, third notice, suspension notice. So when somebody says that, oh, the administration pardoned people, the fact of the matter, the policy states that that's not true. It's a chief of staff that has that particular right. All right? So I just want to make sure that that's in there. There are some things on here that I do agree with, and I think what I do disagree with, I don't know about this area about taking pictures because of Senatorial campaign. I really try to disregard that, because if it was the Senatorial campaign, it was a negative campaign. By the way, it's not a positive campaign, So I don't, that wasn't a good one. But and there's a quote of somebody that took this paragraph, this word from a doctor from AMC, American Medical Clinic. And, I don't know who that is. It wasn't identified. But I think the quotation, I think that's probably Dr. Akimoto. Dr. Akimoto doesn't have privilege at the hospital. He hasn't walked the halls for so many years. So I don't know. He's a big critic of GMH. And I keep telling Dr. Akimoto, hey, listen, come GMH with me, and I'll show you what's going on. But I hate it when the doctor doesn't have privilege at the hospital and criticizing the hospital. If you want to help the hospital, then come and work. And come and work and help us out. Take call with me, right? He's back there? Okay, good. But, he's my friend, His kid is a scholar athlete, by the way, so he's a good kid. But I think here, and I'm just going to end it right there, because I think I presented you with some clarity, and I think that's important. Clarity on medical staff privileging, that we do have to put down numbers on here. And by the way, I sent an email to Cedars-Sinai. I requested for their privileging package as well, because I wanted to make sure I get the facts. I know Speaker Benjamin likes facts. He's a former judge, so I want to make sure I get the facts straight. So I presented you with a lot of facts here and some clarity. And there's some stuff here that I don't think I have enough time to go. But I really take something that one of your former speakers that said that, and it hurts a little bit, When somebody says that all of us at GMH are dysfunctional, that kind of hurts. And, day in and day out, I spend nights and I spend days at Guam Memorial Hospital. Like I said, I don't get paid. I can jump ship. I can go to GRMC and they want me to come there. But I haven't done so. And if I did, the revenue will be lost to Guam Memorial Hospital, and I'm still there. And I'm committed to the hospital. I could leave Island. I could go back to Hawaii and work. I'm not leaving. I've been here. And I've been whistleblowing in this legislature. No, this is a beautiful hall, by the way. I used to be in the old one. I used to whistleblow in that legislative hall for years. But I don't know why you don't give me the same attention that you did today. Labor and delivery. Let's get it done. If J. Rod tells you he can get it done, ask him for a timeline. But that timeline has passed for Gita to get this done, in my opinion. Okay? Questions?
Thank you very much, Dr. Shea. And if I haven't in the past publicly thank you very much for your over 20 years of service to our community. And you're right, you've been coming around and you don't get paid by the hospital, but the work that you do there and the service you provide is something that needs to be recognized, and the people of Guam thank you for your service. So thank you very much, Dr. Shea. But I just want to make some clarifications. Really what we're trying to get to the bottom of here is that whether the public funds that the legislature already provide to the hospital is funding things that we've never imagined. And since these whistleblowers have come forward and alleging corruption and wrongdoing there, we want to get to the bottom of this and ensure that our public hospital is not being plundered. And so that's what this investigative committee is going to be, go after. And what you did here, we'll put that as part of the record. And as you said, you've made yourself available for any clarifications we would need moving forward. So I want to thank you very much for that. I do have one question, Doc, too.
Yeah.
You mentioned about on-call, and you're right, it's something that's needed. But is that a business model that has on-call physicians for the hospital, and the physicians also allowed to keep their professional fee? Is that a standard practice that is done?
Depends. For example, Queen's Hospital. Queen's Hospital, and I believe it still exists, that the radiology department is private, completely private. So that means the hospital allows them to use the space, but it's privatized. It's a different system there.
But for an arrangement like the Guam Memorial Hospital?
Yeah, I understand. And I think, for example, and I know the testimony says that she's paid by the hospital, but I still don't understand. I haven't seen her contract. I wish if somebody have a contract, if it's public, I'd like to see it and what the duties are, etc. Because it's kind of conflicting when I read it. It's like she wants to take care of patients, but yet she's doing administration. But just doing administration, getting paid that much money, and like I say, we don't need any more administrators. But what you're saying is it a common practice to get paid by the hospital and then bill the patient separately? Usually what happens is if you get paid by the hospital for a certain number of hours of call, if that person comes into the hospital, it's considered house patients. House patients are and there's policy for that. House patient, let me explain to you, are patients that don't have a doctor, comes off the street, walks into the hospital and says, hey, I need care. We don't refuse care. We take care of those patients. That's house patients. Those patients you cannot bill. Okay? But if you have a patient coming in and that's your own private patient, yeah, you can bill that because that's separate from house. Because your job is to make sure that you cover house. Am I kind of making it clear?
So it's a common practice?
Well, I don't know how common it is across the country, but I'm saying that at Guam Memorial Hospital, that is a practice that's accepted, and in my opinion, it should be considered to be okay. Because if you're a house doctor, you got to make sure that you take care of you got to make sure, because if not, you're not going to have anybody taking call. Don't ask me to take call because I'm not going to take call.
Okay, Speaker Cruz,
Yeah.
you have a follow-up?
Yeah.
Just Mary, maybe more clarification.
Yeah.
There's a difference between those of you doctors that come in and do agree to take call and you have privileges.
Yeah.
If a doctor is hired as a hospitalist,
Yes.
it's my understanding that they are full-time employees of the hospital. Is that correct?
Yes. If you hire a hospitalist, you are full-time employees. So that means that you're required to be on the call schedule. So, for example, you can't be on call every single day. So you rotate. Let's say for a department, you have 5 hospitalists, and that 5 hospitals will be on call every 5 days. And you're a full-time employee, but your obligation is to cover those particular days.
But does a hospitalist get to bill separately?
No. Usually, the hospitalist will have to give those the collections or the billing to Guam Memorial Hospital.
I think in the testimony that was provided to us last week,
I saw that, yeah.
That wasn't clear. I think what that testimony was talking about was that hospitalists who were on full-time employees of the hospital were being allowed to bill.
Yeah, what I'm saying also is that I don't know the particular incident. That's why I don't like generalizations.
No, I understand. It wasn't
Yeah.
clear, but I think what that was trying to address
Yes,
was
and
specifically
Yes.
hospitalists, not those of you in private practice that agree to do be on call in the hospital. Yes, those of you that have private practice outside can and should be able to bill, but I would think that someone who's full-time hospitalist at the hospital cannot and should
for house
not be able.
patients.
Yeah,
Yeah, for house patients.
for any patient.
Well, not particular for any patients. When you're contracted to a hospital, according to the contract, Peter John and Larry Zomba can make corrections, but from what I understand, is that if your contract has a house to cover a house, your obligation is to cover those patients who don't have any doctors that comes in. For example, if I were to be hired for the hospital to cover a house, are you expecting me to give you my billings also?
I think that's what the discussion was, or at
Yeah,
least...
well, that's not gonna work that way.
Well, I
Sim-
mean,
yeah.
wouldn't it make a difference if it was a doctor, one of you in private practice who was given a small contract of $100,000, as opposed to a doctor who was hired as hospitalist and was being paid $300,000 or $400,000 to be a hospitalist for the specific purpose of handling those kinds of cases?
Well, you can pay the doctor a particular contract to cover those days, okay? And like I said, those are what we call house call. Even Hawaii is the same way, house call. And for example, Queens, I know my colleague who takes call there, and I can give you this example, because I know that for sure. They're contracted to be paid, I don't know, $2,000 a day or $1,200 for a day. And they're down there to cover the residents or medical students in training, anything that comes in through those non-private patients that they cannot bill. That goes to the hospital.
I understand those of you that are coming from the outside, but
Right.
I'm wondering whether or not there is a distinction between those of you in private practice, those of you at Queens or at...
Well, there are
that were-
hospitalists.
that-
Yeah, there are hospitalists that you can hire that don't have a clinic outside. I think that's what you're trying to get at.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah,
is that
okay.
they
So
don't-
you can hire doctors that work particularly just at the hospital, and when they're off, they're at the beach or they're sightseeing, and don't have any private patients. And those are if you consider a perfect example for that is the emergency room. Emergency room doctors usually will take shifts. They don't have a private clinic outside. They only come in to take care of the emergency shift, and that's all they do. And those are hospitals that's all they focus on. No private practice, and they just work at the hospital. That's okay too. If you can find, I don't know how many, 50 doctors that can cover the entire hospital, that'll be great. Because that'll free up us private doctors to just concentrate in our private practice, rather than have to cover the hospital. It is very tough to cover the hospital when you're in a private practice. It's very hard.
No, I understand, and that's... We'll talk.
I get what you mean. But if you can hire 40 doctors to just work at a hospital with no other jobs related outside clinic, do it.
Thank you again. Thank you, Dr. Shea.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any questions for Dr. Shea? If not, thank you very much, Doctor.
It's all
Appreciate it.
that clear?
Thank you. You're always very clear.
No.
Thank you.
All
Dr.
right.
Seidel, I recognize you.
Thank you. I don't have slides and I don't have a computer, and I won't bore you with my CV, but a couple points in my testimony will be short. About 5 witnesses have said there are some good doctors at GMH. I don't want to leave this building with the impression that it's a flip of a coin whether you're going to get a good doctor at GMH. The vast majority of doctors at GMH are good, so I resent that statement that there's some good doctors at GMH, because it gives the impression that you might get lucky and find a good doctor. The fact is, you're going to have to look real hard not to get a good doctor at GMH. Quick story. I've been a chief medical officer at GMH, but I was also a chief medical officer in the States. First day I'm hired, I go into the CEO's office, and he looks at me and says, "I'm going to fire you in 3 years." I said, "What? You're going to fire me?" He says, "That's your job expectancy, your life expectancy as a CEO of a hospital or a chief medical officer, your life expectancy in that job is 3 years." And that's because things change and you burn out. And so when you're a chief medical officer, I don't know what's going on with the administration then, but you work as an assistant and the right hand of a CEO, and you're at will. He could fire you, or she can fire you because they're tired of how you smell, how your shoes are tied. Your sole purpose as a chief medical officer is to make the life of the CEO easier. That's it. And so I don't have any particulars. I don't have a dog in the fight. But as a chief medical officer, you take the job knowing that you're going to lose your job in 2 or 3 years. It's just the way it is. And every chief medical officer, Dr. Duenas is here, I think Lizama's behind me, we know going in we're going to be terminated in 1 or 2 years. We come in, do a specific job, and we leave. And Thirdly, it's always hard to follow Dr. Shea, so I'll just leave it there. But in general, I agree with the vast majority of what he said. And to your question, Senator, I think what you're confusing is a stipend with a GG1 and that. The people who are getting paid and also get to bill, they're on a 1099, so they get a stipend, which is obviously a less salary than if you're a full-time employee. So if you're a full-time employee, you're getting benefits and more salary, you cannot bill, or at least the models that we've used at GMH, you cannot bill. If you're making less money getting a stipend, then in the past they've allowed you to do your own billing. And it's a mathematical equation that a CEO should do. He should say, well, okay, it costs me X amount of money to pay you a stipend, it costs X amount of money to hire a biller, and if you're a smart CEO, you're going to say, well, it's a better deal if I give you a stipend and let you bill, or versus I'm going to pay you benefits, which cost roughly $70,000 to $80,000 a year, and I'm going to keep the billing. So if Peter John, Dr. Duenas, Dr. Lizama, they should get a piece of paper and find out the most efficient way and profitable way, whether you put them on a stipend and let them bill, or whether you make them a full-time employee. Obviously, you should not make them a full-time employee with benefits and let them bill. That would be bad. But the rest is just a mathematical formula to get the best deal for the hospital. So I don't know if that answers your question, Senator Cruz. Yeah.
You know, I just thought of something that Speaker Cruz may want to look into. I think your system that you're looking at, I would encourage you to look at the Kaiser system, Kaiser Permanente. Kaiser Permanente is the HMO, which is a self-contained system. So I'll call you for coffee and we can talk about that system. That'll help him understand it a little better.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Shea and Dr. Seidel. Thank you.
One more thing, make sure you swear on Dr. Akimoto in under oath, okay? He made me do that, okay? Make sure. Don't let him speak until he does.
Thank you. Dr. Akimoto, did you wish to provide nothing? Okay, thank you. We'll now call up Mr. Camacho. Mr. Camacho. And Ms. Weibel, thank you very much for being here. If you want to join Mr. Camacho, and if there's any other board members who are here? Hafide, good evening. Thank you very much for being here this evening. Mr. Camacho, we've sent a notice for GMH to appear on this oversight regarding the GMH, the labor and delivery, and also the general operations. And as a follow-up, we've also asked you to provide us an update on the CMS report. And so I think that's the most important item that we'd like to be able to hear an update from you on. I just want to say for the record that this committee has not received any report or any update on the CMS report. However, there is this, it's being reported in the media that you did receive a report and that a response was due to CMS, I believe it was last week, Friday. So if you can please provide that information, whether that's accurate or not, to this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the hospital did receive a report from CMS from the visit that they completed in April. The date of the letter was June 5th. We received it here, I believe, on June 6th. So since that time, we've been working on providing the corrective actions to the findings, and that we were able to successfully send it off, the responses, to CMS Friday evening. So it was, and we did receive an acknowledgement from CMS that they did receive our responses to them.
Was the board part of the corrective act, the drafting of the corrective action plan?
With regards to the board's portion?
Yes, or was the board provided a copy? Maybe Ms. Weibel, if you can just introduce yourself first and your position on the board, please.
So I'm Melissa Weibel, and I am a Board of Trustee. I am the chairman of the Human Resources Subcommittee for the board, and then I'm also the board secretary.
Okay. So is your chairman or vice chairman on island, Mr. Camacho?
Yes, he is, sir. I believe so.
And they don't plan to attend this oversight hearing?
We were trying to contact him, but we had not received a response.
Okay.
From my
So was
staff.
the board provided a copy of the CMS report?
I have not seen the total report from CMS at present. However, I think something that I'm sure people understand, when, for example, the hearings recently, right, the board doesn't meet weekly, we meet monthly. And each of us, and please bear in mind that our board had already designated when we were all sworn in originally that our board chairman would be the speaker for us. So I'm just trying to give you what little information I can, but it's almost like a microcosm in your subcommittees. So we're working on certain particular issues or concerns that are brought to us by the hospital, by the members who work for the hospital, and then we work out what we believe are best case scenarios for resolving those issues, and then we push those things to the Board of Trustees for those meetings that happen monthly. And we've had some trouble having quorums to meet on a more regular basis, but in the recent last couple of months, we've had even more difficulty doing that, having those meetings, because our administrative staff that work at the hospital, who need to be in those meetings to help us in those committees and to bring their reports so that we can continue to work on those, have been called in to do either work for the legislature. They're pulling more data, more reporting that they need to do to bring to the legislature, which is also a needed function, but it has a tendency to overlap and cause us problems in order to get them time to get the reports done for us as a board. So currently, I feel like that's a bit of a conflict and it's all good. I mean, the legislature needs to be informed and needs to be kept up to date on what is occurring, but I'm seeing that that also pushes our meetings out. And we only have so many weeks in a month in order to try and meet. And I know I feel there are sometimes we're having to push off meetings because we're just not prepared, because administrative staff hasn't had the opportunity to pull together the reports and filings they need to do for us, because they're working on reports and filings for other functions, whether it's the Joint Commission. That's a big deal. That stuff has to be done and submitted within certain time frames. Whether it's CMS, same thing. You have a limited amount of time in which to complete your paperwork for them and get that submitted, and those things take precedence, quite frankly. They take precedence, but I think that that has been a disservice to those of us who sit on those subcommittees trying to help push other items through and then meet as a board.
Thank you. In light of what you just provided us, I want to apologize that we didn't mean to put you on the spot here.
Yeah, no, I
So
understand.
if there was an arrangement made with the board, within the board, that your chairman is the spokesperson who would speak for the board,
Yeah.
that's why it's very important. We did extend that same invitation to the board to the chairman. And so unfortunately, the chairman is not here today.
Right.
So I want to ask Mr. Camacho, was the board chairman provided a copy of the report? And was he informed of the corrective action plan that you submitted?
The board chair was advised that we had received the report. I did advise him that I was going to be working on the parts of the board because of my familiarity with how the board's different functions and with regards to how information is channeled forward to the board. So he was aware of that. He has not, I don't believe that he has not received a copy of the report yet.
So the report or the corrective action plan was not provided to the board through the chairman?
Not at this time, sir. And because of the fact that we had that deadline to meet.
Okay. I find it very interesting that from the Joint Commission report and supposedly from the CMS report that's being reported in the media, one of the biggest problems is the lack of involvement of the governing board. And for the board not to be involved or advised of this very important report from CMS is troublesome. It's very troublesome for me, and I'm sure others here would feel the same way. And so, Mrs. Weibel, I want to thank you and apologize again for putting you on the spot. But it's very apparent that from top leadership, the board is being kept in the dark, is not knowing exactly what is being, what is transpiring, especially for something as important as the CMS report, which funding is in jeopardy at this point. The Vice Chair has some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peter John, I have some questions, and this is regarding specifically towards operations and just reviewing some of the records and again with the Joint Commission report, and I've yet to see the CMS report, so I'm not going to be able to comment on that. Will you be able to please answer a couple of my questions? You currently sit, and you are the chairman of the Performance Improvement Committee. Is that correct, Mr. Peter John?
Yes, sir.
And that's you're the chairman of that. That's one of your primary functions as CEO and administrator of the hospital.
Yes, sir.
So I just want to ask you a question. So with regards to efficiency, considering the fiscal state of the hospital and moving forward with operations, what methodology are you currently using to measure efficiency within GMH?
Through our performance improvement program, sir, we have different indicators for the different departments, and that is reported up through the Performance Improvement Committee, then on to the board's Quality and Safety Committee, then reported up to the board.
Now, what approach are you taking in terms of your methodology? Are you population-based, episode-based, patient outcome-based?
With the different indicators, sir, but we are guided by high risk, high volume, problem prone.
Now, are any of these based on any standard practices or publications currently in use by other hospitals, other jurisdictions? Because I know there's, I think for the most part, 8 commonly used methodologies with regards to performance efficiency, or is this a system that's been developed over time just for GMH?
No, we do the PDSA, the Plan Do cycle, so that is part of our performance improvement activities.
Okay, all right. Now, are you having some difficulties? And I understand that part of the methodology that I think I've seen you use in the past, or as you explained with regards to patient outcomes, have you identified difficulties with this particular methodology, or have you or the board looked at other methodologies and evaluating based on new practices and new standards within the healthcare system?
Part of what we do, sir, is that we take a look at the information that comes back from the monitoring that is completed. If there is a part of that also requires that we look at trying to trend, identify if there are problems that are developing, and then also taking a look at how we need to try to address that.
But what method, and you use the same methodology throughout the entire hospital?
Yes.
Okay, and so do you find this to be the most effective? Have you looked at other methodologies that might be available for particular departments or particular issues that you've run in or problems you've identified in the hospital?
In my experience, sir, from the last time and then this time, it's effective.
And so this compared to prior, and what did you use before to gauge efficiency and analyze issues?
It's still the same, the PDSA cycle.
So how is it different from this to that side? Because the methodology you use provides very different information. And it's going to be dependent on the needs. For example, you could be using, have you ever heard of the lean system or methodology?
Yes, sir.
And so have there been any talks of particularly looking at Sigma 6 for perhaps billing to identify any issues?
That is actually part of our strategic plan, sir, to take a look at as far as education for the leadership in the hospital, but we've not been able to achieve that.
Do you have anybody in the hospital currently lean certified or Sigma 6 certified to start evaluating those?
I'm not aware of that, sir, but there may be. I'm just not aware of if there
So,
is some.
with regards to billing, because there have been some, at least, statements made that there are issues with billing, what's your error percentage currently with your billing? Or what would you say, of your billables, what percentage are not billable? And then we can go into the different categories of that. But in total, do you have a percentage available?
I don't have that information, sir.
So, say you had 100 bills out, you couldn't even give me a percentage, at least for 2017, what percentage of your total billables you were not able to bill?
I know that since since the new team was in place at GMH, billings have gone down in terms of unbilled.
But I'm just asking you, it should just be a percentage base. I mean, you're the hospital administrator. You should know, based on methodology, I mean, if you're using a methodology, you should have that number on hand. You don't have it.
I believe that we are pretty successful in sending out our bills, sir. I'd say 80%.
80%.
At least.
So that's about a 20% error?
It could be.
Could be. And so let's just take 20% of that. What percentage of that 20 would you say are due to unbillables, are due to coding errors? Could you give me an estimate on that?
I'm sorry.
All right. How about charting errors?
With regards to the medical records?
Yes.
I know that the medical records department is very, very diligent in following up with the physicians. If there is an error, there is a process by which they can go back and look to correct that.
And just I'm not necessarily trying to highlight this or, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Peter John or Mr. Camacho. But really the issue here is in moving forward, I mean, these are numbers that should be readily available. I mean, and I think it's been stated here and it was stated currently tonight, it's very difficult to ascertain what our problems are if we're not on a consensus on the data. And so, I do encourage that moving forward, we take a look at moving forward with the initiative of perhaps using a lean methodology for the hospital and start taking these initiatives a bit more serious and moving forward. And again, not to put you on the spot, but you're sitting here as the hospital administrator, you can't give me an accurate number on what percentage of our bills are not billable. You couldn't tell me a percentage that are attributed to charting errors, coding errors. But we have had multiple conversations, you've been in by this body saying you need more money. And I'm looking at this as potentially this is more money, we just don't know. And another concern that I had was based on policy AMS 400, which is part of the privileging, I think part of the credentialing for the providers, there is a portion there that does require auditing at least during the entire period, monthly during the entire period of the audit. And based on on records that just recently submitted, I think as early as May, with signatures from the Board of Trustees, with approval of reapproval of this process. Could you tell me, based on the methodology that you're using, anything that was received, any information or feedback based on those audits? Are we seeing issues with billing? Because there was testimony earlier that there are no issues with billing, that they actually do a great job. But now that I have you as the actual hospital administrator, you can't even give me an accurate percentage on what those numbers are to ascertain whether the statement made prior as to whether or not the billing is good, charting's accurate, charting's timely. We have no metrics to verify that right now, correct?
I can provide that to you, sir.
Thank you. Moving forward, I'd like to touch into a couple of different items as well. Future investment efficiency goals. Would you be able to at least provide two based on current talks? I know we've talked before about a GPO model. Where are we on that?
We actually had approached a GPO organization.
And when was this?
This was sometime last year, sir, I believe.
Was this after we spent about a month working together?
Yes.
We sat down with that whole
Yes.
presentation.
Yes.
Also about a year ago. And what came of that?
We've been working with the vendor. He was asking for information that for us to provide with regards to high usage items, so that he could take a look and run through his system, to be able to make recommendations.
Did we ever provide that information to the vendor?
Yes, I believe we did, sir.
And have we followed up with that vendor?
We have, and I think it's still going back and forth with regards to information that they're looking for.
Okay, and for, I guess, if you can, Mr. Camacho, for, I guess, the benefit of my colleagues, because we were working on that, could you please just kind of give a brief summary of what the GPO model is?
The group purchasing arrangement is something that where a hospital can join in with other entities and looking for the best pricing for commodities that we would need.
And so basically you purchase in such large bulk quantities that the price drops significantly, at least on certain items, which if you're able to plan out your usage over a period of time should result in, I wouldn't say significant savings, but noticeable savings. Is that correct?
That would.
And and based on your research, is this a model that's been applied in other hospitals, especially public hospitals, or both public and private?
I believe at least in private hospitals, I don't have any information with regards to the public.
All right, thank you. Now to the Joint Commission report, I was able to count 41 points of emphasis. Of those 41 points, because there was a statement put out, Mr. Camacho, when that report came out, that a lot of those issues, and I wouldn't say this was particularly from the hospital, but I'd say from the administration in general, that this Joint Commission report highlighted the fiscal needs of the hospital and the lack of funding. Would you agree with that statement or assertion on the Joint Commission report?
On the Joint Commission report, so we were required to do a deep dive, and in that process, we've validated that there are some direct relations to funding, and there are also indirects.
Right. And this is, at least from what I can tell, and with my experience working in the healthcare, working in a hospital, working in a clinic, I was able to count 32 out of 41 of those points of emphasis that in many ways had no relation to funding. Would you like me to go over some of those? And would you agree that that's close based on the analysis you did? I just want to make sure we're at least in the same ballpark. 32 of the 41, would you say were more based on leadership and administration than on actual funding?
There are, again, sir, factors, and with the indirects, there would be other, factors involved, like the leadership, as you're saying.
Okay, so which would you say the primary factor I'm alluding to on the 32 out of 41, whether they're leadership or funding issues?
I would have to go back and just review it again, sir.
Okay. So I just want to go over a couple of them, Mr. Camacho. And we can go all the way to performance improvement, the section regarding performance improvement. Are you familiar with that? Because as the hospital administrator, I'm sure you probably have a copy with you on the Joint Commission report, if not completely memorized, as to all of the different things the 41 points that need to be rectified at the Guam Memorial Hospital. Would you be able to follow along, or would you need a copy?
If you have a copy, so that
Okay. Be able to get a copy. I can move on, but if we can get the clerk to provide a copy. Yeah. Okay, we'll get that to you and we'll come back to you. Let me just touch into a couple more points. And I'd like to go back to 2014. So another thing that I had noticed, the Inspector General of Department of Interior had done an assessment, I think, which was a fair assessment, would you say?
I believe so.
And there was a recommendation about your fee increases. Now, I was reviewing, I think it was a meeting, might have been the March meeting of the board, where it was brought up that there were items that required a fee upgrade. Do you recall that? Mm-hmm. Do you remember how many items there were?
I remember we had separate list of those items. I can't tell you exactly how many were on them. I didn't think it was a significant number, however.
Would you like to provide? So, and as she's coming up, I was, at least based on the board meeting, it was ascertained that there were 56 individual items, at least based on the board meeting, that required a fee upgrade, or fee update, which was the recommendation from the Inspector General from the Department of Interior when they did the assessment of GMH. However, I did notice that in the April 19th board meeting, that the board approved that they would only approve a 5% increase, which is within their limit of what they could increase, even though there were 56 items that were determined to be above the 5% increase needed, which would require legislative approval in order to adjust. Am I correct?
I think you're talking about those new fees that are introduced.
Yes, I saw the new fees. There were like a couple hundred, if not 1,000, that I had saw. What I'm talking about is the reevaluation that happened in March. The new fees, if you go back on the record and look at your board meetings, those were discussed as a separate item, whereas the 56 were based on the reassessment of the fees that was done in March. And of that, from the consultant that you hired, right, I think it was the charge master, determined that there were only 56 items that were that needed to be increased, and those 56 items needed to be increased over the 5% threshold that the board was authorized. I'm just trying to understand that.
We haven't come before the legislature to submit those.
And that's what I was wondering, because you had the public hearing on the 5% on those items, those 56 items. But then in April, instead of coming before the legislature, what I saw was there was just the approval of the 5%. Nothing was going to exceed the 5% threshold. So in reading that, it looks like then it's not going to come to the legislature anymore because the board only approved a 5%.
Whatever those items are, we do have intention to come to the legislature. We're trying to package it together actually with the room and board, because we have been looking at the room and board. It is very low, and there is a committee that has been formed to assess the room and board and to include bundling of services, because that is one of the issues that we've had with some of the providers.
But you're within your scope, and that was even part of the recommendation from Department of Interior that you can readjust your fees quarterly. So
no,
why?
That's not correct. We're only allowed to increase fees 5% per annum without coming to the legislature. Let me finish, please.
Okay. You're only allowed to increase 5% per annum without coming to the legislature. That's not what I'm saying.
That's
the
correct.
recommendation from Department of Interior was there should be a reevaluation of those fees to ensure that they're on par with Medicare rates, so that you're getting your proper reimbursement back.
And that's how we came up with those.
But that doesn't mean just because you have to come to the legislature, doesn't mean that just kills the potential to upgrade your fee.
No, not at all. And that's why we identified those fees, and we also look at the room and board that it's very low, and it's an ongoing process. There's a committee that
I
was
understand,
formed.
but what I saw in the board reports where there were only 56 items, they were itemized, 56 items that needed to go over the 5%. And it looked like to me in reading that it just died within the committee. I didn't see any talk of it having to get bundled into room and board. I don't know if that's even necessarily appropriate.
Because it's not ready to be sent out yet. We're still working on it.
But it was ready to have a public hearing.
We will address that in due time, Senator.
Now, could it come to the legislature?
It
So-
will, once it's
Okay.
ready.
There were 56 items identified, and I'm
Okay.
not going to go into this too much. I'll just go through it one more time. 56 individual items identified for a fee adjustment over 5%. You don't
Okay.
think it wouldn't have been prudent to come to before the legislature, approve those fees so that we're actually getting reimbursed for what we're spending on those items, or are we going to wait and keep getting underpaid until we have it packaged appropriately?
Senator, I'm really happy that you're thinking that way. I did recall back in 2015 when I came before this body, and I had a difficult time convincing the legislature to raise the fee of about 300
I
fee
understand.
items.
I understand.
But
And-
Senator Rodriguez was there, and we
But what
were
I'm
able to
talking about
increase
now
it,
is
yes.
2018
Yes.
with almost a whole new panel, a whole new legislature.
if it's-
in
if
a financial
there's-
crisis, please let me
Yes.
finish. In a financial crisis, a whole new panel, right? Never mind 2015, and I'm looking in the meeting and I'm seeing that those 56 items that could have been and please, if you have anything to add, because I see you nodding like you agree, and if you have any insight, because obviously when we read the board minutes, it's very simplified, and I'd really like, as a trustee, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the matter, because that was kind of disturbing to me, because I kept searching, and maybe I missed an email, maybe I missed a correspondence as to why, even though this happened and it was identified in March, why it still hasn't come to the legislature to try to get you guys more money. So please, if you can.
I can't tell you why it hasn't come before you yet, but I know in the discussions in the board meeting that our thought process was we need to at least do the increase we can effectively now, which was go ahead and get the 5% increase, and then bring the rest to the legislature so that that can be increased later. Yeah. So we didn't want to lose any time on at least gathering as much as we could, as quickly as we could, which meant we could do the 5% immediately.
But why wasn't that correspondence ever even brought to the chairman or myself as the vice chairman? Why am I having to dig through this to figure it out? Because, I mean, I know we work tirelessly, and most of the senators in here, to find you every penny we can. And so when we see missed opportunities, and again, I mean, obviously there's a lot of justification because it was the Department of Interior, based on a fair survey of the hospital, that recommended we reevaluate these rates every quarter with the flexibility to increase it to ensure we're getting reimbursed.
Right.
for
That
those
more
costs.
coincides with what Medicare does, right? They do reevaluations throughout the year, so there are some bump ups throughout the year. I can't answer to you why you haven't seen that.
I mean, we're supposed to be working together.
Yes, I understand.
You know, and the truth is, we have different ways of looking at it. Every single one of us here. So if you think you're going to wait till you feel something is packaged instead of working constantly with us, then it's going to be another 40 years before we ever fix anything. You know, I mean, I'd rather work on it together with you guys while it's ugly in its raw state and see if we can come up to a conclusion than you know, going forward here, finding out, are we hiding something? Or what are we trying to work through now? And is that the bundling that you were talking about? I think you had made a statement on that same meeting that you were going to start to look at bundling of services. Was that what
We're
you were
looking at the room and board because there are certain providers that deny claims for they claim that it's bundled service. It should be included in the room and board. And, you know, we disagree with their denial. So instead of going back and forth with the insurance providers, we're looking at adjusting the room and board and include certain items that are usually denied so that it would be included as a bundled service. Right now, we are a fee-for-service, so we charge for everything, basically.
Okay, now how about the allegation of unbundling lab panels? Is there any accuracy to that statement?
I don't want to respond to that one, to that issue at this point. I know that we do bill for the lab services, and there was information that was provided to me, but I haven't looked at that, and I don't want to misspeak on the issue of the lab. We do have a problem with the system, where lab is a different system, and then, you know, the Optimum is a different system. And sometimes when they merge, there are additional charges that appear on one, I mean, on both. And so we always have to reconcile. There's a reconciliation process that is ongoing to remove those issues. But a lot of those issues have been resolved. That's to my knowledge.
And I'm glad you you run into these issues because they're different systems, yet, you know, I'm hearing from the administrator we're still using an old, outdated methodology to kind of evaluate the issues and inefficiencies within the hospital as a whole. And I still don't see, as the chairman of the improvement, Committee on Improvement, we're not seeing much else there. I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your indulgence. One last, you know, I have a lot, but actually I'll just go to one last thing. Two things, because I'm going to drop this after this and I'll give you the copy, but I just want you to know that under performance improvement, there were 6 issues of emphasis just on performance improvement, which is your committee, Mr. Peter John, or Mr. Camacho. And so that's why I'm hitting into these questions of methodology, because again, I'm reading 32 out of 41 were leadership issues, which I believe should have all gotten caught. I mean, at the very least, soiled instruments being transported to the decontamination room without even a biohazard label. I mean, if that's a funding issue, please let me know. I can go pick one up for you. But if you're going to claim that that's a funding issue, that's on us, please let me know. I'll go get you one. But those kinds of things are unacceptable. I'm not talking about the stained soil, ceiling tiles, or the torn canvas. I understand that. You know, the PA system, yeah, I got that. Pre-cleaning of instruments was not standardized. I mean, I know you guys got some standard operating procedures. How could that not be standardized? You know, and I put this a lot on you because I'm not going to say it, but I look like a fool when from day one I stood behind every single one of you and said, pay them what they deserve, and they'll perform up to that capacity. And I've not seen any of that. So just understand how it is for me to see this. Instruments being without a label. No standardization of pre-cleaning of instruments. Some very basic things. I could take a medical assistant who had 1 week of school who knows better than this. Just the last few points. Something else I saw. Resolution, if you can tell me about Resolution 2018-42, approved by the board. Anybody? Mr. Chairman, if you could. Can we?
Yes, he did.
Yes.
And can you just introduce yourself, sir?
Yes, my name is Eloy Lezama, and I'm the chairman for the Board of Trustees.
Okay. And Resolution 2018-42. Imagine my surprise when I saw this. I believe it was the April, it might have been actually the May meeting when I saw this. When we know, I think as a government, the type of austerity measures we're going to be moving forward, when we know about the fiscal situation of the hospital, and imagine my surprise when I see a resolution approving 2 new positions at GMH. Are you guys familiar with what I'm talking about? Do I need to read it out? I will. Assistant Administrator, Nursing Services. I think it to be a classified position. Is that accurate?
Actually, those aren't 2 new positions.
They're unclassified currently, correct?
Yes.
And you want to make them classified?
Yes, what we want to do is make them even to all the others that are within the Guam Memorial
I
Hospital.
understand, but you see my position right here with the climate that you're in. Because the board, I mean, you're approving moving forward with 2 new classified positions. You do understand the type of liability that one more classified employee puts on government of Guam, right? For the next 60 years, 40 years, 30, however long they decide to stay here. Once they're in the civil service protection, we're paid for them for a long time. Do you understand that you're going to put that on this government?
So this was actually part of an action that Senator Rodriguez had started with regards to classifying middle-level managers, healthcare professionals at the hospital. And these two positions, the director of nursing and the assistant, were not included in that. So we were trying to make that correction.
Understandable. Okay, we have the director or administrator of nursing services. What I'm talking about, what was approved by here, and I think it was alluded to, that there are way too many administrator positions and not enough healthcare provider positions. And I didn't even read the other one because this is even more interesting. The deputy assistant administrator to the assistant administrator. Deputy assistant administrator.
The assistant administrator is simply a title going down from
and then you have the deputy, so you have the administrator, assistant, deputy assistant. So what am I gonna see next time? Assistant to the deputy?
With regards to those two positions, sir, as I said, it was something that I'd actually discussed with Senator Rodriguez, and he was reminding or telling me that his intention was to include the nursing leadership positions
including
in the classified
the
service.
deputy assistant, because
Yes.
that to me sounds like a tertiary. You got the administrator, assistant, and deputy assistant.
She's basically the director of nursing, so it was a position title that was provided at the time when there was some restructuring going on at the hospital.
But did you think it was appropriate to do it? I understand, yes, you might have talked to Senator Rodriguez, but I'm just asking you what you believe. Do you believe this was the appropriate time to add new classified positions that are also due, because here's the key difference, is classified positions, especially these type of high-paying positions, are due increments. So were you prepared and considering that as the hospital administrator, thinking forward when the current fiscal climate of what that was going to do to us, to hire 2 new classified positions, due increments annually?
Those positions, the positions that they would be existing or holding now, would go away.
And how does that make it any different? What I'm talking about is the overall. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to apologize to my colleagues. I could actually go much longer, but I just want you to understand my disappointment in you, Mr. Camacho, with everything that's been going on. And I look forward to seeing that CMS report as soon as you make it available to this elected body of the people of Guam.
Thank you very much, Senator. Speaker Cruz?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Peter John and Mr. Lozama, has the board ever been called in for an emergency board meeting during your term?
No, we have not.
Peter John, what would need to be done to have the board called in for an emergency board meeting?
We would have to do the notice for the meeting and give the appropriate notice time, and then we would be able to hold the meeting.
And how many days would that notice have to be?
I believe it is a week. A week, and then we would have to have a notice again 2 days before the meeting.
And when you received the CMS report on the 6th, did you provide a copy to each of the board members?
I don't believe we did, sir. We were focused on trying to get it out, and we're starting to work on the corrective action plans.
Mr. Zama and Ms. Weibel, were you aware that the hospital had received a CMS report that was telling them that if they didn't have a corrective action plan in place by October the 1st, that they would lose CMS, the agreement, the contract would be canceled?
We were aware that there was a report out, but we haven't seen the full report.
That's correct.
In the initial report, there was quite a bit of, as Vice Chairman Estevez pointed out, considerable criticism about the lack of governance by the board, even failing to meet and not approving certain things. Is there any reason why the board wasn't provided a copy of the full report on the 6th or on the 7th or on the 8th of June?
Again, sir, we were really working on trying to prepare the responses for the CMS report that we had received.
How many of the major criticisms in the most recent report were of the governance of the board?
3. I think it's 3.
Did you feel that maybe they ought to be included in the discussion on the responses to those 3?
They should be provided, they were going to be provided with that report, sir.
To date, have either one of you received a copy of the full report?
No, we have not.
So, let me get this straight. They've not seen the report. CMS instructed you or directed you that you had to have the response in by close of business last Friday,
right,
their time, which was going to be Saturday morning Guam time.
Yes.
Did you not feel that between the 6th and the 18th of June, you could have asked the chairman to have an emergency board meeting to meet on Thursday or on Friday to, one, review the report that had come from CMS, but more importantly, to see what you were going to be responding back to CMS, since it's under their governance?
I didn't think of that one, sir.
So when are you going to provide your own board? I'm going to be, I want to see it myself, but I'm shocked that your own board hasn't seen it. What's so secret about that's in it that your own board can't see it?
It's not a secret, sir, for them. We just didn't have a chance to provide it to them yet.
And was there any reason why, even if they hadn't received and reviewed the entire report that, I believe it was 78 pages at least, according to the media, and they hadn't reviewed it, that they could or should have received a copy of a draft of what your initial response was going to be so they could review it, instruct you that you had their tentative approval and they wanted certain things said to clear their names and their reputations as it relates to governance of the board, so they signed off on it before you sent it off last Saturday or last Friday night?
The report I signed off on, sir, as the administrator.
I understand. And who is your boss?
The board.
And did you clear that with your boss, or did you feel them inconsequential to this whole thing? Shouldn't you have received their approval before you signed off on it?
Because, again, sir, I looked at the responses for the governing body based on our operations and how I know that they would see the flow of information. And so based on that and our operating procedures,
but
we
that
were
was
working on
that was
But
a number of the criticisms in the earlier report, at least the one that I saw. Maybe that was different, but in both the JCO and the CMS report, as I understand it, there was considerable concern about the lack of governance, the lack of oversight by your governing body. And for you not to believe that because they're your boss, acknowledging that they're your boss, that you would have the temerity to send off the response and not clear it with them? You don't see anything wrong with that? I don't care what the time period is. You've had since the 6th. They should have been included. An emergency board meeting should have been announced on the 7th, and them called in on the 15th, the 16th, and the 17th, and had them sitting there every single day and going through every single one of those and saying, we need to get an SOP to clear this one up. We need to do this. We need to do that. You never cleared it with any one of them?
I advised the chair that I was going to be working on the corrective action plan for the governing body.
But you didn't tell him what the details were. And he never saw that report before you sent it out.
You're correct, sir.
Unbelievable.
Thank you, Speaker. Just a follow-up to that. So if the board didn't see the report or the corrective action plan, was there anyone else that saw this plan before it was provided?
It was reviewed by our compliance officer, sir.
And so after it's a committee that you have together, so you guys just took a look at it and said among yourselves, okay, we're going to submit this without the concurrence of the board, so no other higher authority was able to review that document before it went out?
You're correct, sir.
Okay, thank you. Vice Speaker?
The Post claims that it was able to obtain a copy of the CMS report, even though the board was not given a copy, and we have not been given a copy. So we're really just getting information from the news. And we've been through this before. I know we were talking about the 2017 CMS report and your response to it. And I was wondering, in this report, in the 2018 CMS report, then how many of those are, I don't know what they call them, complaints that, or just complaints that they had brought to your attention before? Were there any surprises in there, or were those things that you had already heard? Like board governance, I think we've heard before in prior reports, isn't that correct? What else? Was there anything new?
There was a greater emphasis on the physical environment.
All right. And what did your response say? Did your response make any reference to the sales tax? Because I saw some, in one of the news articles, it says that the governor says he would have to declare a state of emergency if lawmakers repeal the 2% sales tax set to take effect October 1, 2 days before the CMS agreement is slated to be terminated. Did you make promises in that response that are based on the sales tax?
The only reference to the sales tax was on the physical environment, and that there was a mechanism to be able to look for those capital projects that we needed to do, but also said that at current, if we needed, as money became available to us, we would, proceed with some of those projects.
All right. But it's true, isn't it, that there are several of the complaints that were made in the CMS have really nothing to do with needing extra money, and a lot of those just have to do with following consistent procedures. For example, the ones that were reported in the newspaper was facilities failure affected the ability of the hospital to identify an adverse event in which a patient received blah, blah, blah. It's that reporting of adverse events and then having them reviewed, right? Which I think we've even heard testimony regarding that, and then we've heard testimony by another doctor saying that's not true. All of these incidences are reviewed, but CMS is saying they're not, right? And they pointed to specific examples. The other example CMS brought up was, or the newspaper quote from the CMS is hiring or reviewing of physicians' credentials. They said was not done according to your rules. And the third one was failure to ensure that nursing staff develop and keep current a nursing care plan for each patient. Failure to ensure all drug and medicine carts and areas were secured and locked. Failure to maintain, to ensure that quality assessment and performance improvement program efforts address facility improvements directly impacting the quality of care and patient safety in 12 out of 40 departments in the hospital. Failed to ensure that anesthesia services were integrated into the hospital-wide data drive QAPI. At least there are maybe 3 out of 4 of these that seem to me curable. Is that your understanding, Mr. Lezama?
Yes, I agree.
All right. Well, when will we see the CMS report, and when do you expect the board to see it?
The CMS's process is that once we submit the report, they will review it and either accept or not. And then at that time, it's supposedly releasable. It's open to the public.
Are you saying they've prohibited you from releasing your response to us?
I'm
The
merely
report and
stating
the
what the
response?
process has been as far as I know, ma'am, since I've worked at the hospital. CMS will issue a report after their survey. We will have a certain number of days, the 10 days, to be able to respond. They will look at the report.
No, I'm asking you if you're prohibited or not from releasing it to the board and to us. And how did the Post get a hold of it?
I don't know. I don't know, ma'am.
Well, it seems like it's public now. I think we've gone through this before. Then we asked you to check your counsel and let us know, is it prohibited or is it just your policy that you're not releasing it? We really need to have that in writing. If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, could we get that in writing, whether we could get a copy of the CMS report, whether we could get a copy of the response the day that it's made, or if you are prohibited by some kind of legal restriction, which no one has cited to us. I'd just like that to be on the record, please.
Legal counsel to give us advice on that matter.
Yes, thank you. I would think the board needs to know. Thank you.
Senator Ogun.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question to the members of the board. Does the board have the authority to hire and fire the administrator and the CFO?
Yes, that's
So based on the discussion here this evening, where a CMS report was received by the GMH administrator, and you were notified that, in fact, the report had been received. You were not given the opportunity to visually see the contents and the implications that it would have on the operations of GMH and the possible loss of Medicare, Medicaid resources. In the private sector, what would transpire in a situation where, in fact, a response is provided with as much impact as the CMS report? What would happen? How would you anticipate the board to respond if in fact, the board was never given an opportunity to be able to review the contents of that particular report and to be able to approve some of the provisions?
Well, I would look at it in terms of using legal terms, negligence or gross negligence or ignorance. So we'd have to look at why we weren't informed and kind of based on that decide as a group what should be done.
So were members of the board notified that in fact a response was provided as of last Friday?
Peter John had called me last week, and I was, in his defense, I was on vacation last week. So as part of our conversation, I said, you're the CEO, I leave it to you to, respond as best you can.
But you did designate an acting chair?
Yes.
So was the acting chair notified of not only the contents of the report, but that a subsequent response was going to be provided?
I can't say.
And Mr. Camacho, you mentioned that, or at least it was part of the conversation, that perhaps three of the responses were related to the board. Is that correct?
I believe it is 3.
So if you filed a report of which part of the responses would obligate members of the board in terms of being able to either enact policy or ensure that some of these issues and concerns are addressed, it comes back to one of the questions that was just asked repeatedly, is why the board was not given, even the working group, because we understand about the open government law, the requirement to be able to meet within that 5-day restriction, but even the working group, to give them the opportunity to review that document and the contents, especially as it has direct implications on the board making commitments on behalf of the hospital. So that was not considered?
Again, sir, we were working on the corrective action plans. I did advise the chair that I would be working on that, and the responses were based on what their responsibilities would be with regards to the quality improvement, with regards to the facilities.
But then if one of the concerns in the past has been that the Board of Trustees had not been actively participating in some of the deliberations and the activities of GMH, wouldn't it have been prudent to allow them to at least review it and then to provide feedback? If that was one of the concerns of either the Joint Commission or CMS, I would think that that would be at possibly one of the forefront approaches in terms of compiling your responses and then ensuring the participation and the involvement of the board. And I think, Mr. Lizama, you certainly highlighted what would otherwise happen if, in fact, board members were not privy to some information on a follow-up of a private business in terms of being able to commit that organization. So I just think it's very unfortunate that in this case, the Board of Trustees, which is that body, is responsible for ensuring that, in fact, you stay in place, as well as the CFO and other unclassified personnel, that they were not given the respect of acknowledging the contents of the report and knowing the specifics, and then knowing how the hospital is going to be able to respond and to commit resources. Because that, at least at the very least, in conjunction with reaching out to the chair here, if in fact it's going to require additional resources to be able to commit to that report. And that's why it's very important in this case that at least the board should have been involved. Let me ask you, let me try to take a different approach also and say, based on the discussion with the vice chair, he highlighted that 32 out of 41 were specifically leadership related, management related in terms of decisions. So that leaves us with 9 provisions that could require additional funding. So if GMH had the funding today and it was not an issue, what are the 3 things that you would immediately do to be able to fix the hospital so that you not only come in full compliance with the CMS requirement, but that hopefully the accreditation would be retained? What are 3 of your first immediate actions if budget was not a consideration?
One of the most important things that we would do, Senator, is to address the electrical panel situation at the hospital. That is a very serious concern for us. A second one would be to take a look at the information system that we have at the hospital. It is not fully integrated. There are different components, and as a result, we have challenges with that. And we also have capital needs for different kinds of equipment. And so if we had a dedicated funding source, then we would be able to better plan out for capital replacement so that we won't have a 39-year-old generator. We won't have equipment that haven't been seen since whenever and only in Africa. So those kinds of things we would take a look at equipment replacement, so that we can do these things better. There are there are many needs, sir.
And I appreciate you highlighted three major areas. One is the electrical panel. The other one is the information system, being able to upgrade it and make sure that they interface with each other.
Correct.
And then the third one was updating or procuring more current modernized equipment. So looking at the electrical panel, someone mentioned a $6 million figure that is possibly going to cost $6 million. Let me ask you, over the course of the last 2 years, has there been any instance where in fact either members of the board or yourself have approached the governor and insisted that electrical panel is a major issue that could conceivably affect the operations of the hospital should something happen? In the last 2 years, has there been that request for additional resources to address that component?
Yes, sir, there has.
There has been, and
Yes,
it's been in writing?
Senator, may I add something? I have brought that up here with this body about the electrical distribution panel. And, you know, I agree, there is a leadership issue, and then that leadership issue is shared with this body.
I understand.
Because we have been
but let me
underfunded
also,
for over 30,
Ms.
40
Magnolia,
years.
let me
Senator,
also say this
yes.
much. In the last 8-9 months of this fiscal year, decisions have been made to obligate this government in payroll obligations, and this is as of last month, of an annualized payroll obligations of this executive branch, general fund, by approximately $6 million. And that figure continues to grow probably exponentially every month. So what I'm saying is that if of all those positions that were hired for the executive branch, outside of educators in the classroom, outside of physicians and nurses, and outside of law enforcement uniform personnel, then those funds could have been tapped to help you address your electrical issue at GMH. Because from what I'm hearing tonight is that could conceivably, something could happen tomorrow. And then what would happen to our patients and all of your personnel who are working there in terms of their safety and in terms of making sure the continual operations of providing health care services to our people. I'm hearing the sense of urgency on that issue. Whether you brought it up to this body, and we have tried repeatedly, whether it was a $45 million request
Tried the
that was
175
facilitated. No, that was facilitated and was provided.
No, it wasn't.
I'm saying
175 was
a few years
requested.
back.
That was
Yes.
just 2 years ago.
But I'm alluding to the sense of urgency that I'm hearing. So now the question is, has the members of the board and the administration approached the front office and seen inquire as to what resources may be available to augment what you're already receiving so that you can dedicate it to the electrical panel?
Senator, with all due respect, I want to recommend something to this body. I urge you all to come to GMH. When was the last time you came there? Come and walk
Last
the
week.
halls. Okay, come and walk the halls with facility. Come and walk the halls with the manager so you see the problems that we're having at GMH. This problem at GMH is not new. The underfunding of GMH has been in existence since 40 years ago. There's an article, 1979. What does it say? Creditors threaten GMH again. That was almost 40 years ago. And that exists today. Just today, I received an email from our oxygen vendor that tomorrow, if we don't pay them so much, $100,000, they're not going to deliver oxygen. That is what I have to deal with day in and day out. We got a call from GPA that if we don't pay, they're going to turn off the power. How can the hospital function? There have been reports after reports, independent studies after independent studies that say that hospital needs to be funded. 1991, Senator.
Okay,
Please let me finish.
I'm going to conclude this conversation.
Please let me finish.
No, you've already mentioned all those requirements. What I'm asking you is, have you literally gone and collected money from this administration so that it can be redirected to GMH to take care of your operations? If you're gonna come here repeatedly, and this chief executive has been given a 15% transfer authority for the entire fiscal year, some of those resources that are otherwise used for non-uniform law enforcement officers, some of those resources, aside from revenue tax, because I recognize the revenue tax needs collection officers or agents, but outside of uniformed police officers, healthcare, nurses or doctors or educators in the classroom, then all those excess resources that could be otherwise be identified should have gone to GMH to provide you with the support that you need.
Maybe,
no,
Senator.
No, because you continue to bring the issue here. This legislature has responded to you repeatedly as much as we can give you, but we've also provided the transfer authority to the chief executive so that he has that flexibility. And that's what I'm alluding to. In this particular case, there has to be a greater discussion or fight for resources when it comes to assisting GMH, rather than only try to blame this body. Because we provide you the resources, we provide the flexibility to the executive branch. Now they have to take that flexibility, inclusive of reorganization, take that flexibility and ensure that we can streamline government agencies and services, and any additional resources that are set aside or saved could be given to our hospital. That's what I'm saying. Because you keep bringing the same story back here, but then we hear and read about where some of the resources are being applied. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
If I could real quick, Mr. Camacho, you were asked by my colleague, if you had no issues with the budget, you had all the money you needed, what would you spend it on, right? I just want to be very clear that nothing you said on that list was part of the 41 things that the Joint Commission is requiring you to fix. I was even generous. So I said 32 items were leadership issues. I'm going to give you one that was not a leadership issue. That I would just be nice and say it's a funding issue. Life safety, identified inoperable fire alarm, smoke, and heat detectors without interim life safety measure assessment and implementation. Inoperable fire alarm. It's one of your dings from the Joint Commission. And I gave that to you as a funding issue. Yeah, they're so broke they can't afford a fire alarm. And you couldn't even give me one item on here. That's the reason why you might be losing your accreditation. It's like you're on a different plane of existence. Here they are giving you a list of things you need to address, and you didn't even give me one item. Door doesn't lock, no security in the pediatrics, the maternity ward. I gave you those as fiscal issues, highlighted. You didn't even mention the stained ceiling tile. I gave you that one as a funding issue. The tear on the canopy at the ER. Now you're coming to me saying if you had all the money, you want to do all these big, bold things. But it's like you're the administrator. You don't even know what this list is. I'm getting paid $55,000. How much are you getting paid? I know, because I stood up here and I argued. And I got the angry phone calls defending you. Not so we can come to this position to where I look like an idiot. There are no more chances with me, Mr. Camacho. Zero. I'm telling you right now, I don't want to hear about funding issues again until you can at least, as the administrator, provide me what your percentage of errors are on your billing, what your successes are in your billing in a simple percentage. Like, have a leg to stand on. But you were just asked the golden question, what would you fix if you had all the money you needed? Didn't even hit a single item on the Joint Commission report. Am I crazy, or does that seem a little ridiculous? It's rhetorical. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, again for your indulgence. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Morrison, Senator Torres.
I hope that this is a process into finding a solution, because I think that the island is very concerned about accreditation, and that really ought to be our focus on how to not lose accreditation. But I was wondering, though, what is the timeline that you expect to receive a response to your corrective action plan?
I don't recall off the top of my head, ma'am. I'll find that information and send it to you.
Okay, because what we don't want to do is lose sight of what would be a drop-dead date to affect those corrective actions if necessary. So hopefully we, and you know, it's very difficult here. There are a lot of questions going back and forth. Some people maybe are privy to some information that's contained in there, maybe through the post or otherwise, but you know, without having that report, we really don't, it's like shooting in the dark, and I don't want to be irresponsible in that way, but if you can, you know, provide the timeline. And then I was also wondering, the report was compiled, the response was compiled by your compliance officers. Describe that generally. Who are your compliance officers? Are they the top management, or what is it that, who is that group?
We have one compliance officer, ma'am.
Okay.
But in doing the responses for the CMS, there were different work groups that were put together to be able to come up with the analysis of what was the problem, developing the plan of correction to be able to correct the deficiencies, and then also tracking mechanism to be able to ensure that the deficiencies don't occur again.
Okay. So the most responsible ones that have the most institutional knowledge would be the ones who put that report together, or the response?
Managers and staff who are knowledgeable, as you said, yes.
Okay. I don't have any further questions because, like I said, without knowing what we're really supposed to be questioning, it would be fruitless. But Sizus Masi, everyone, for being here in a show of support for our hospital.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to GMH management and the Board of Trustees here and staff. When the sales tax was passed, and you talked about earlier, Mr. Camacho, that we'll have that ability to plan and address the perennial challenges of GMH going forward. I know you presented some of the items that you like to address that are necessary at this time, but understanding that, or the climate right now, I'm sure you're aware that there is momentum, or let's say by this body, to repeal the sales tax. I'm sure you've been following that. Where do you see this legislature going from here? Understanding that that dedicated funding source may no longer be there, and you stated earlier, having that ability to plan forward, understanding that there is a dedicated funding source. But now, the writing's on the wall. The sales tax is going to be repealed. Where do you think this legislature should go from here?
Senator, I will defer to the wisdom of this body with regards to, if not the sales tax, then maybe there is another mechanism that can be identified, to provide the funding source to the hospital.
I bring that up, Mr. Camacho, because I know information was shared that this funding issue goes decades back, and I at least want to say for the record that this 34th legislature not only attempted but put a measure before the body and was able to provide a dedicated funding source that has not taken full effect yet, but at least we could say that we got that far. But now we see that that dedicated funding source may be reversed. I do hope there's another option. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Espadon, do you have anything? Okay, thank you. Speaker, did you have anything else?
Just a follow-up question on one of the on the earlier one about the most recent attempts with the governor. If memory serves me right, Benita, you're on the fiscal team?
Yes, I am.
And so over the last month, we had asked the administration to do an amnesty program. And we've received reports that 3 weeks ago they had collected $9 million, and they're expecting 16, but they had already collected 9. Was there any attempt, as was asked earlier, for you to go to the governor and say, my wish list at the hospital, never mind the 31 that was mentioned by the vice chair, the most important thing that I need for the hospital right now is a replacement of the electrical panel. Could you provide me the 6 million of that 9 million, or the 9 million, or the 16 million that's going to be brought to do just that? Because this body hasn't appropriated that 9 or 16 million. It's up to your cash management that's up there. Mm-hmm. But was there any attempt by you or anybody else to plead to him that it's been determined by Peter John that never mind what JCO wants or CMS wants, we think the most important thing is the electrical panel, and that we want $6 million to do this right now?
Well, it has been brought to the attention of the administration of the needs of GMH regarding the electrical distribution panel. We have also brought up the issue of the shortfall for this fiscal year. We are now, the accounts payable is at 14 million. And that's a big challenge. And
I understand, but when the question was asked
yes.
of your wish list, what would you want? The first thing that came out was the electrical panel. So
yes.
I'm just saying, why wasn't the request made that the first 6 million that's been collected, let's put the electrical panel in, because then everything else will fall in place after that. At least that's what I heard this evening. Yes. So if there's 6 million, there's 9 now collected and 16 that's going to be collected. If here was a windfall that you guys hadn't planned on, if it's going to be there, the first 6 goes to buying this panel so that everything else follows after that.
Yeah, that's, that would be good. I think my understanding is also to cover the projected shortfall, right, for this fiscal year.
Then I'm just saying, as the vice chair asked, your priority. There was a JCO listing, none of it was talked about. There's a CMS listing, none of it was talked about. It was the panel that you guys talked to me about last year when you made your initial presentation. I remember that. At that point, you guys told me it was 10 million.
For the electrical distribution panel?
Yes.
We had it at 6. It was 5 million.
No, in the presentation last year, it was 10. Okay. I distinctly remember the number. I was the only one in the room that...
Yeah, okay. But we do need, I beg the indulgence of this body to please address the needs of GMH. We have 14 million in payables right now. And the underfunding, especially for this year, we were appropriated subsidy of $9.5 million.
We have to take a 5-minute recess because of the broadcasting. So we'll take a 5-minute recess for now.
Okay, thank you.